Okay, here we are with the Grand Campaign set up. Troops all over the place. Force pools, I think set up. I don't see anything in Spain. I know some of the miners don't have anything, but I think Spain doesn't either, apparently. Okay. I face a peculiar problem here, which is my rule book, mostly unread until now, is missing. I have page 12, then it goes to 17. I'm missing the inside page, much like this rule book where one is falling out. Apparently, one didn't even make it in. I've looked through my materials. I don't have like an extra page kicking around or anything. So who knows? I've contacted OSS, no reply. I have no idea, this was kickstarted back 7 years ago. They still seem to exist. At the very least, they could have forwarded me to whoever's publishing the current edition or whatever, so that maybe I could buy the update kit or something. But, honestly, it was really unlikely I would get it in time. And what I found is most of what I'm missing appears to be in the old rulebook. So I'm going to rely on the old rulebook. There may be some slight differences. I'm not counting on it being too much. One thing that's definitely missing is this Irish. I don't think that's a big deal. I've already discussed the idea that the French would have an invasion force and actually be able to sail a fleet to Ireland to drop troops off when they have a special transport capability, I think from Boulogne, where they're allowed, I think that's what this little thing is meant to represent, where they're allowed to cross using transports if they can clear the North Sea completely. Which, incidentally, it's empty at the beginning of the game. Ha ha ha! But Napoleon's already marched east, sorry. Okay. Let's start digging into these rules. Like I said, they mostly seem to be the same. There are a few little things. I also had to figure out what the intention behind the optional Grand Campaign combat results table is. I think you could play this with anything. I don't see it as being particular to the Grand Campaign. What I think is intended here is that both sides roll dice, so you get a wider variety of possible results. I like that. And there's another facet that we're going to use that I also like, which is the tactical matrix chits. Why? I'm playing it solo. This kind of chit selection is horrible because it makes withdrawals hard and therefore makes decisive battles more possible. And we'll get into that as well. Let me relight my pipe because I've let it go out with my chatter. The biggest differences that the new campaign game introduced was different victory conditions for the game. The old campaign game didn't really work. I'll go over the differences because I don't want to dig out the old game and play it too. Playing this is a big undertaking. Okay, let's look at the old victory conditions first because they're easier. And then we'll talk about the new ones. I almost always played the Grand Campaign. Like, I think I played a scenario or two and then jumped into it. All right. In the old game, the French player wins an automatic victory If all major states except England are neutral or pro-French at the end of any turn, if there's at least one unbesieged French strength point inside Paris at the end of the game. Those are the two options. The second one is problematic for various reasons. It allows Napoleon to fall, and I think maybe fall of Napoleon's an optional rule, so I don't know. If the French player does not get an automatic victory, the person who has the most production cities at the end of the game is the victor. Only cities which contain a red or black infantry symbol are counted for victory. The person who controls the largest number of strength points which occupy a city hex gets them. The scenario ends in August 1815, unless prematurely ended. It automatically ends if the French achieves an automatic victory. The scenario can be terminated at the end of any turn by mutual agreement of all the players. Yeah, okay. If Napoleon is killed, the scenario automatically ends 1 year after the turn in which Napoleon is removed from the map board. Napoleon is not allowed to die in this. I think I like him dying, so I'm going to leave that alone to the old rules. If Napoleon is exiled, the scenario automatically ends 1 year after the turn in which Napoleon went into exile, unless he's returned from exile and is deployed to the map board. We'll talk about Napoleon's exile under the old rules when we get to the new rules, because again, they've changed. Napoleon automatically comes back under the new rules. And again, I don't like that. All right. The current victory conditions. Victory condition 1 should be used for all sessions. The remaining are divided by the number of players involved. Remember, the other one was just how many production cities do you have? Spain has 1 to begin the game. They can maybe get a second one. I thought there was a scaling factor involved. I think I put one in place so that, like, if Spain got 2, at the end of the game, it would have 2 over 1 as its value. That makes Spain very powerful. It also makes their conquest of Portugal really important. France has 4, sort of, I guess. They're kind of hard to expand. But the thing is, the other countries have have an easier time getting into Germany or whatever. And honestly, the proportional scaling isn't terrible. And that was how I fixed the Grand Campaign game. It allowed for a very fluid diplomacy where people were looking at, you're going to win. Maybe we ought to gang up on you, much like they would in an Empires and Arms game. That's attempted to be avoided here. All right, condition 1 ends in 1815 unless victory is achieved through one of the following. An automatic victory. The game can be terminated at the end of any turn by mutual agreement of all the players. The player in control of the most production cities is the winner. That's the old victory conditions. If 2 or more players control an equal number, they may be considered joint victors. Again, this is really unfair to Spain. So they will never agree, right? Only the cities that are marked with ports and anchors are counted as port cities for victory condition. Only those marked with red, black, or white infantry symbols are counted as production cities for victory determination. I think there's only, what is it, red, black, or white? There's red? Guess that's these. Okay. Then there's white. I think they mean Portsmouth, which is blue. Because I don't think there are any white ones. Yeah. Okay. The player who controls the largest number of strength points which occupies a city controls the city hex. The person who controls the city enables the conquest at the moment of conquest. If Napoleon returns from exile and France is conquered, the game automatically ends at the instant of conquest. Is this different? I don't know, because what it says, it talks about these cities. But other than the mutual agreement at the end of the turn, at the end of a turn, there's nothing talking about victory in here. Now, that's the victory conditions section. I think it's the old rules. But let's keep going. Because somehow or another, victory condition step 1 counts in all scenarios. Okay. In the 2-player game, the French player gets a decisive victory if he conquers England and controls at least 15 production cities anywhere on the map at the instant of conquest control, or if he controls Paris, Moscow, and at least 35 port cities anywhere on the map at the instant of control. This must include Lisbon and Antwerp. Antwerp, I can see. Lisbon's a pain in the ass. The French player could get a marginal victory. Now, in the 2-player game, it was just, did you beat France? The marginal victory is if the French player controls Paris and Moscow and at least 19 port cities that are also major cities or capital cities anywhere on the map. I don't know how many port cities there are, but let me count. I think 44 total port cities on the map, okay? But 1, 2, 3, 4 of them are British. So you pretty much have to own the entire map. This is kind of like a nations in arms. The victory conditions for that, which were pretty hefty. Or at least maybe they were. In terms of only by controlling the port cities can you actually enforce the continental system, is I guess the feeling there. This is very hard, except that when you conquer a country, you don't have to abandon it. You can occupy most of its cities. But wait, it's worse than that. Here they have to control Lisbon and Antwerp and 35 port cities. Here it's 19, but they have to also be major cities or capital cities. And it must include Antwerp, Corunna, Hamburg, Königsberg, and Lisbon. Let me check whether there are 19 major cities or capital city port cities. Alexandria is basically not in play. Not counting the English ones, I think there were 23. Might have been 24. I don't remember. And England has London, so there wouldn't be a lot of additional with that either. So you still have to take most of the board. Let's say it's 24. I think it's 23 though. Let's say it's 23. That means there's 4 you could leave out. So you could leave Stockholm out, St. Petersburg, which you probably can't hold, Riga, and maybe one more. You know, you have to take Königsberg. So yeah, maybe Copenhagen. Yeah. Again, you have to pretty much conquer Europe. This is to get a marginal automatic victory. But this happens at the moment that it occurs. The French player is allowed to refuse the marginal victory condition, and then they can't accept it for the remainder of the game. Which is to say, if you're on your route to the decisive victory, you might not want, you might say, look, I'm going to get the whole thing. All right, there's more. They can win a marginal victory if there's at least one unbesieged French strength point inside Paris at the end of the game. This is the old one. All the following conditions must also be met. France is an active non-neutral state which has never been conquered. Spain was invaded by France prior to 1809. Russia was invaded prior to 1813. France controls at least 4 production cities anywhere on the map. And that's like 3. That means they control 4 major cities in France, as far as I can tell. Anyway, the big deal with that is the old victory conditions. Have a strength point in Paris. But they've added conditions, having to fight Spain, having to invade Russia, and never having surrendered. Otherwise, it was relatively easy for France to meet this victory condition under the old rules. That's it. That's France's victory conditions. The game ends in a draw. By the way, this doesn't feel marginal. Taking 19 port cities, like Napoleon didn't get to there. The game ends in a draw if the following conditions are met. And the old game was just win-lose. You won if you had a strength point left. And it was very easy to make sure you had a strength point left. You would beat Austria, you would beat Prussia. You would beat Austria, you would beat Prussia. You would drive Russia down as much as you could, but you would never invade them. You would never invade Spain because that's just stupid. And you would just continually beat back Austria and Prussia again and again. And make sure that there's never, more than two powers facing you. And you would just declare war on them as soon as you could. Okay. All right. The game ends in a draw if Napoleon returns from exile and there's at least one unbesieged French strength point inside Paris at the end of the game. Neither player is victorious. That allowed the French to win under the old rules. If they didn't dig Napoleon out of exile, like if they didn't dig him out of Paris, the game ended in a French victory. Worse, the game ended in a French victory if Louis the 17th or 18th, whoever replaced Louis the 16th, I think it's Louis the 18th, to be honest, is reinstalled and Napoleon never comes back, the French could win off of that. And people are able to go to war with France under those conditions, but it's like they don't have a historical reason to. France has been diminished back to her borders before the revolution and all that. All right. This is the two-player game, though. But it does get used in the later scenario, in the larger scenarios. So keep them in mind. The English win a marginal victory if there's at least one unbesieged French strength point inside Paris at the end of the game. However, all the following have to be met. France is active, which has never been conquered, i.e., okay. Spain was invaded by France prior to 1809. Russia was invaded prior to 1813. France controls fewer than 4 production cities anywhere on the map, which means almost all of France has to have fallen. Because again, they have Paris, and I think it's any other major city counts as a production city for them. The English win a decisive automatic victory if Napoleon returns from exile and the English player conquers France at the instant of conquest. The English player in this case is the anti-French player. It's a two-player game. The English player wins a decisive victory also if none of the previous conditions are met. I don't know what that means, because this seems to cover most everything, but I'm sure there are some little things in there that are possible, like maybe there's no troops in Paris at the end of the game, but France hasn't fallen. I think that's possible. We have to swap batteries. I'll get into the larger number of players. Eventually, we get to the 5-player, which is based on the 4-player, which is based on the 2-player game. I want to peek at the 3-player game. It's a little different. Now, what's kind of interesting is all these other versions use 2-player game conditions 2 through 5, but they all use 1 as well. So essentially, everything except the English victory conditions, everything up to the English victory conditions, including the draw if Napoleon returns from exile and is back there, is in play. And already you can see, yeah, okay, I can see this. And if it was just a 2-player game, I'd be great with it. But that same level of sort of specificity, specificity, sorry, is present in all these others. So the three-player game, you use up to the draw. Player controlling Austria, England, and Spain. That's one of the three players. Wins a margin. Now, Spain, of course, is like pro-French at the beginning of the game, so what's up with that? They get them as the pro-French player. Okay. If Austria, England, or Spain I don't even know what that is, because Austria is not controlled by a player. Where do they tell us how many players we use? They actually don't. This is the only indication of that, I think. And it gets worse because the game is sort of designed to be a two-player game in ways that, I don't know, maybe the original was too. It's hard to tell. But they needed to fix both, right? The two-player game, you could continuously knock Austria and Prussia out very, very easily because you didn't have to worry about alliance rolls. And you could always keep the alliance number in good enough shape that, like, the coalitions never formed. Anyway. And in the multiplayer game, you could still do that. You could still knock one then the other. But that's actually, like, that is a reasonable tactic, I think. The key is for the anti-French player to, like, manage to get a coalition together that's big enough. All right, anyway. The player controlling Austria, England, and Spain, I'm guessing this is the English player. I think we're going to be looking at England, France, and Russia. And if Austria or Spain is anti-French, they're controlled by the English. If Prussia is anti-French, it's controlled by Russia, I guess. Okay, but that's not spelled out, right? Or is it? Number of players. Wait, here we go. 3 players. French player controls all pro-French. 1 player controls Austria and England and will control Spain if it becomes anti-French. 1 player controls Prussia and Russia. Okay, that's different. Why do you have the alliance rules? Do you still have them? Right? Like, those mechanisms, they were in the original game. We do have the alliance phase. Yeah, I don't think you make alliance die rolls for the most part in the multiplayer games anymore. And this was one of the flaws in the original. So yeah, I guess there is a so we did find where it tells you how many players. So I guess there is a single player who is Austria, England, and Spain. And Spain may be pro-French during some of it, but the French are allowed to, like, move some of the Spanish pieces. I don't know. We'll see if we run into this. We're not going to play it. We're going to play the full 5-player game, which feels 2 players short. Why is it 2 players short? Why is it 2 players short? I guess Empires and Arms is only a 6-player game. I thought it was 7. I know he used 6. I really thought Empires and Arms was 7. Spain, France, England, Austria, Prussia, Russia. Wait a minute. What's the 5-player game? Wait, I think Spain is with England in this. I think they compacted Spain and England. This didn't used to be the case. Yeah, I knew something was fucked up. Weird. Okay, so we're going to have to worry about those Spanish rules where Spain's not really a country. And that actually helps make sense. If Spain and England are one country, yeah, they are kind of more equal. Because England had trouble getting production point, getting cities as well in this game. They don't have access to Germany. I still think the scaling worked, but anyway, for that aspect. All right. If Austria, England, or Spain conquers France, this is a marginal victory for Austria, England, and Spain. If Austria, England, or Spain conquers France, Prussia was conquered 1 or more times, Austria was conquered 2 or fewer times, and Spain was never conquered by France. You can see how Byzantine these are getting, right? They're going to continue. The player controlling Prussia and Russia wins a marginal victory. If Prussia and Russia conquers France, or if Prussia or Russia conquers France, what does that even mean? I guess they're the one who takes Paris? I don't know. Austria was conquered 2 or more times, Prussia was conquered 1 or fewer times, and Russia was never conquered by France. The player controlling Austria and England, what about Spain, wins a decisive victory after the following condition. Napoleon returns from exile. Austria, England, or Spain controls Paris at the end of the game. That's a little different. Prussia was conquered 1 or more times. Austria was conquered 2 or fewer times. And Spain was never conquered by France. The player controlling Prussia and Russia wins a decisive automatic victory. Why did they give the marginals first? If Napoleon returns from exile, Prussia or Russia controls Paris. Austria was conquered 2 or more times. Prussia was conquered 1 or fewer times. And Russia was never conquered by France. The player controlling Prussia and Russia wins a decisive victory. This is another decisive victory. If there are no unbesieged French strength points inside Paris at the end of the game, Austria was conquered 3 or more times, Prussia was conquered 1 or fewer times, and Russia was never conquered by France. The player controlling Austria, England, and Spain wins a decisive victory if none of the 3 player conditions are met, including 2 through 5, which includes the draw condition, which is Napoleon coming back and existing. I got no idea how to keep my head around that. Okay, the 4-player game goes back to just 2 through 5, so leave out that 3-player game stuff. The 5-player game is going to, the only change to that is that either England or Spain can win. But it uses the 4-player victory conditions, which is going to be a little weird because this game includes Austria and Prussia, and they're going to be split up here. And it doesn't tell how to split them. Okay, so the 4-player game, this doesn't even make sense. The player controlling Austria and Prussia wins a marginal victory if either Spain or Russia was conquered by France, and at least once, Austria was conquered 2 or fewer times, Prussia was conquered 1 or fewer times, and either Austria or Prussia conquers France. My guess is whichever one is holding Paris counts. But again, they use the word conquers France and holding Paris differently, like in different places, not as if it's a single thing. The player controlling England and Spain wins a marginal victory, which is just fine. They're combined. They fucked up and made the 5-player game the wrong rules. And how did that not get caught? Did anybody play test these? I get the feeling the decision to move to this kind of victory conditions had to be made fairly early because one of the biggest problems with the game was the campaign game. The victory conditions didn't work. Everything else kind of worked. And there's a lot of extra chrome, coming later. England and Spain wins a marginal victory. If Spain was never conquered by France, Austria was conquered 2 or more times, Prussia was conquered 1 or more times, and either England or Spain conquers France. Player controlling Russia wins a marginal. If Russia is never conquered by France, Austria was conquered 2 or more times, Prussia was conquered 1 or more times, and Russia conquers France. So if the wrong conquests happen, you could end up in one of these default situations where England and Spain win a decisive victory or something. I don't know. It feels really weird. Like, it doesn't feel like Russia. So there might be an argument that Russia needed Prussia and Austria to be conquered. I think it's a lot harder to say. By the way, I would split these out. Austria conquered 2 or fewer times for Austria. Prussia was conquered 1 or fewer times for Prussia. Just to make things clear. Because you shouldn't lose as Austria because Prussia was weakened. That doesn't make sense. Okay, where do we go here? Right. The player controlling Austria and Prussia wins decisive automatic victory if Napoleon returns from exile. So is this the only way I can get decisive with the Prussians? I get marginal in the other. If Napoleon returns from exile, either Spain or Russia was conquered by France at least once. Austria was conquered 2 or fewer. Prussia was conquered 1 or fewer. Again, I would split those. And either Austria or Prussia controls Paris at the end of the game. Player controlling England and Spain wins a decisive. By the way, this is not a bad choice of a game because Austria and Prussia generally, again, France will be pushing one or the other. Like one or the other will be knocked out of the war. So you'll always have something to do. There's something kind of cool about that. On the other hand, I really kind of like the freewheeling diplomacy of the original in some ways, but we shall see. But basically, you have to defeat France twice to get the decisive victory. And that means I will have to go with the Napoleon automatically returns option. The player, because I can't fix these are so fucking convoluted. The player controlling England and Spain wins a decisive if Napoleon returns from exile. Spain was never conquered by France. Austria was conquered 2 or more times. Prussia was conquered 1 or more times, and either England or Spain controls Paris at the end of the game. The player controlling Russia gets a decisive if Napoleon returns from exile. Russia is never conquered by France. Austria was conquered 2 or more. Prussia was conquered 1 or more, and Russia controls Paris at the end of the game. By the way, these numbers here are to indicate how many times you've been conquered for keeping track of this. All right. Russia also gets a decisive victory if there are no unbesieged French strength points inside Paris at the end of the game. Russia was never conquered by France, and one of the following is also true. Austria was conquered 3 or more times, and Prussia was conquered at least once, or Prussia was conquered 2 or more times, and Austria was conquered at least twice. So that's a way of doing it without Napoleon being on the board, without Napoleon being exiled. Russia can win that way if Austria and Prussia got beat up. This kind of leads you to, gosh, as Russia, I really should let Austria and Prussia hang on the vine. Not that they have much choice, I think, but finally, the player controlling England and Spain wins a decisive victory if none of the other 4-player conditions are met. And the 5-player game is fucked up. Instead of England and Spain getting credit for a victory by England and or Spain. See, that would have made more sense in the 4-player game to cut that. Like, maybe this was same as the 6-player game. What you do is you just split out Prussia and Austria and make it so only their hurt condition is a prevention. All right. I am going to stop there because my voice is dead. I'm regularly taking little naps. It happens sometimes, but right now it's because I can only sleep a couple hours and then I wake up and my chest is hurting too much or whatever. I mean, it's just, I don't know what's wrong. It's not my heart. It's there's something wrong with the muscles. Anyway, yes, the heart's a muscle. But I went and looked it up to make sure, what the feelings would be like. There are other things, but I'm not really willing to look at them. All right. So, at the beginning of the game, France and Spain are pro-French. This is important because Spain is part of the England player in the 5-player game. Again, this is not how the game used to run. The game used to run, you would play one country and you would roll on the alliance. You would roll on your alliance checks to try to bring a neutral into play on your faction side. Minor states, anyway, England, Austria, and Russia start at war with France. Prussia is neutral. I haven't set those up yet, I think. I'm not sure. The minor states, the French have satellite states of Bavaria, Holland, Italy, Switzerland, and Württemberg. English has Portugal. Prussians have Brunswick, Hesse, and Saxony. Austria has the city of Munich itself is an Austrian-controlled city. Actually, we could have set up in Ulm. Most of Bavaria has fallen. We had a within 1 hex of Ulm, where we could have been in there with max force. Actually, I've got it under Ferdinand here because I believe the crown, the crown prince essentially, and he's not crown prince, is he? I don't remember. Should essentially be able to. He's probably just an archduke. Have some mobility there. If I'm stuck there, here I have the river line, oops, and a few other things to protect me. Seemed like a good idea. Anyway, I don't know. What am I doing here? Neutral miners are Denmark and Sweden. They use, just like in the original, French counters for the Danes, Russian counters for the Swedes. There's a problem. These countries don't have a force pool. Pretty much every minor country has one nation's force pool. And otherwise, you have to use landwear or something. There is something weird there. Hold on for a second. There's a landwear over here. In the British initial forces. 6 infantry, 1 landwehr. Not a King's German Legion. Those are here. That's a regular. See, these both look like infantry. These look like 1 infantry, 1 infantry. Oh, 1 infantry KGL. Okay. Yeah, for some reason, I have a landwehr in the British force pool. I want to check the original, see if that's there. I also have a couple militia, but I'm okay with that. Indeed, it's there on there too. I think I used a King's German for it, simply because it makes so little sense. The English already have militia. I'm not sure why they need landwehr, but it's essentially the same shit, which we shall see when we hit the production and whatnot. But it's zero morale crap. Okay. Unformed minor states, Dalmatia, Naples, Poland, the Rhine Confederation, and Westphalia. Now, in the old game, because the counters weren't double-sided, I could just flip them over. Here, I rotated them 180 degrees, but it's not quite the same. I think I may put something on top of them to try to indicate that they're not active yet. Okay. In solitaire, you play the 2-player game two-hatted, basically. 2 players, The French player plays all pro-French. The non-French player plays all anti-French. The neutral state is invaded by either player. Now, this is interesting because that sounds like the original game. Yeah, it is. So in the two-player game, you play with the full alliance die rolls and everything. But in the three-player game, the French player controls all pro-French. One player controls Austria and England, and will control Spain when it becomes anti-French. One player controls Prussia and Russia. Better explained there. The French, 4 players, you split off Russia and Austria. And Austria and Prussia, well, you split off Prussia and Austria, and they become another player. And then in the 5-player, you split Prussia and Austria from each other. But England and Spain play the same as one country. Presuming that Spain is anti-French. While it's pro-French, the French get to control it. And that's true with all of these. Well, no. If a player controls something... So this is the kind of weird thing. If you're pro-French in the two-player game, I believe you can utilize that nation's force pool, like their whole force. But if you're pro-French in the multiplayer... I don't know. It's weird. What would happen if, like, Austria and Prussia decided one wanted to be pro-French and the other stayed anti-French? I don't know. Anyway, sequence of play. A naval phase has been added. We saw how that worked in the naval rules that I did specifically. Then you hit a production phase, which is... you get a flow of troops every turn. There aren't replacements per se, there are reinforcements to the force pool. There aren't replacements in this game. You buy out of your force pool every turn. This is for the neutral player. You open up with the neutral player's side. They get a naval production, a ground movement phase, and alliance. Notice they do not have an attrition. The other players, naval, then attrition, alliance, production, ground movement, and combat. And that'll be repeated for the anti-French. We already went over the naval rules, such as they are. These have a movement point cost on them. I want to go into this. I don't know what the MT is, but there's an IM, which is the interception modifier. There's no interception modifier here. That's what's going on. And the MT is the marine transport value, which is going to impact if you use the Raider optional rule, which I think we will. I'm not sure. It doesn't look like it adds much, but anyway. Naval combat is very much like land combat. Blockades, unlike most games, you can kind of try to slip the blockades in this one. I'm just going briefly over all of this. Okay. The alliance phase. We're getting close to where I run out of rules. Okay, some states have special rules during the alliance phase. These supersede those rules supersede the following rules as defined within each state's section. Wait, what? That's stated wrong. The alliance display is used to record the city points accumulated by pro and anti-French factions and to indicate the current political status of the 6 major states and the 4 minor state groups. At the start of the game, the 10 alliance displayed markers are placed in the appropriate boxes. I should do that. In 2 players, we ignore the 3 or more player alliance rules. And what happens is, during the alliance phase in the pro-French player segment, the player can choose one eligible major state and attempt to change the political status of that state by rolling a die. It'll be modified by city points and maybe victory points. I only see city points being mentioned so far, but we'll see. And you shift it one box. So you can go for an anti-French state and try to turn it neutral and pull it out of the war, or you can go for a neutral state and try to bring it in on your side, in which case it'll control it. And likewise, the anti-French player gets the same way of doing things. These are optional, i.e. you don't have to roll when the odds are against you, because they'll always be in one player's favor or the other. However, in 3 or more players, you don't play with that anymore. Now, that used to be the mechanism in like anything less than 6 players in the original game. During the alliance phase in the neutral player segment, each active player must announce if his state is joining either the pro or anti-French faction or remaining neutral. During the alliance phase in the pro-French players segment, each active player must announce if his state is remaining pro-French or adopting neutrality. After this, the French player can choose one eligible major state, excluding England, which is not controlled by an individual player. Everything is controlled by an individual player. And attempt to change its political status by rolling the die. What the hell? So somehow or another, Rule 3 got embedded in here. But every state is controlled by a player. A majority of pro-French players may elect to force a pro-French state to adopt neutrality. Pro-French forces may then initiate combat against that state during the next pro-French turn. And likewise, the anti-French has this die roll capability again, but it's meaningless. It feels like an artifact from the original that, like, a majority of anti-French players may elect to force an anti-French state to adopt neutrality, and then they can initiate combat against it during their next anti-French turn. That state could become anti-French again. Like, here's the problem. The way this is worded, first player to go is the neutral player. They shift to be pro-French. The pro-French players, on their turn, force it to become neutral. And they can't attack it until the next pro-French turn, and it becomes pro-French again. I'm guessing if you vote someone out, I don't know. Like, the alliance should be able to prevent you from joining, is I think the big deal. You wouldn't see this very often. Okay, the alliance die roll, which should only apply to the 2-player game. Well, no. The political status of minor states may not be altered by the die roll executed during the alliance phase, with an exception for Denmark and Sweden. During the game, however, whenever a pro-French force controls the production city of a minor state, that state may automatically become pro-French. Whenever an anti-French force controls the production city of a minor state, that state may become anti-French. If all the there should be an exception for Portugal too. If all the production cities of a minor state group are controlled by pro-French forces, the group is declared pro-French. If all the production cities of a minor state group are controlled by anti-French, the group is declared anti-French. Groups don't matter anymore. Not if the die rolls are gone. If the production city of minor state is not controlled by pro or anti-French forces, the minor state is neutral and the group is considered neutral. This is kind of weird because this is talking about how minor states are conquered, essentially. That is probably in the rules that I don't have as well, but anyway, I do have their equivalent. The French or British players decide if they or another member of their coalition will control the units of a minor state that has joined their alliance due to an enemy invasion. They probably choose themselves. The die roll executed during the alliance phase is cumulatively modified as follows. 1 point for each pro-French city point and for each pro-French major state and minor state group. The alliance groups and the city points, the only effect they have on the game was the alliance die roll. Possibly victory points or something, but for scenarios. But for the grand campaign, the only effect they had was on that. And now that die roll is pretty much gone, although maybe Denmark and Sweden can be pulled in with it. During the game, the pro-French faction receives 1 city point for each production city in an anti-French major state, which is currently controlled by pro-French forces. This is forfeit when the pro-French faction loses control of the city. I think these don't include the landwehr-only cities. During the game, the anti-French faction receives 1 city point for each production city. Same thing. However, there's an exception to it. This city point is forfeit when the unfriendly major state becomes neutral or joins the player's alliance, unless the city has been designated a supply source under how states are conquered. This supply source city point may be lost if the faction loses control of it, just like any other city point. You might have to mark that special. During the game, the anti-French faction gets 2 victory points. Whoa! Now we have victory points, which aren't in here and have no purpose. If Napoleon is forced to withdraw, as per standard rule H4, the pro-French never receives victory points for any reason. All victory points are forfeited whenever a major state is conquered. During the alliance phase, when any major state is conquered, so any change in the... During the alliance phase, when the English player rolls to change the political status of a major state, 2-player game only, the die roll is increased by 1 for each production point England lent that state during the immediately preceding naval phase. If a state is dropped from an alliance, it may not move in that alliance's movement phase and must instead move in the next neutral phase. If attacked, it joins the alliance opposed. Nothing that prevents it from rejoining the alliance, which is necessary. I don't know what victory points are useful for. I feel like, first of all, you only get them for beating Napoleon. You get 2 of them. That's big. And they have no purpose as written, but they may intend to be modifiers to that alliance die roll in the 2-player game only, I guess. We're going to break here because I'm almost out of battery. Charging pissed off on me, so I got that one in instead. It looked like it was working fine, but because it's got to do with the twist of the cable, it can fall away. All right, declarations of war. During an active player's alliance phase, a player can choose any major states not controlled and declare war. The political status is then altered. State's alliance is moved to join the faction opposed to the state making the declaration of war. The ground movement phase of the active player's current turn may be used to invade them. The active player may not initiate combat against the forces of any major state not currently a member of the opposing faction. Now, the fix to this might be, so one fix, the easiest fix is actually probably a majority of players can elect to force a state to adopt neutrality. That they can do it during the current turn, during the next movement phase, which would be similar to the declaration of war. The problem with that is, of course, states couldn't, the idea of stabbing an ally was a real rarity. Now that's baked into other game systems. So for example, in Empires at Arms, you pay a high glory cost for abandoning an ally and another cost for declaring war. Exchange of prisoners during the game. Whenever an Army or Navy unit surrenders or is captured, it's immediately removed from the map board and placed in prisoners. At the start of each January, all imprisoned units must be exchanged on an equal strength basis as completely as possible. Not sure what that is, right? Like point for point. So I got to give you landware even if I'm only getting cav in return. Are leaders involved in this? After all equal exchanges are completed, additional agreements to exchange remaining units for political cooperation or any type of diplomatic concession, which does not violate the basic game rules, are permitted. All exchange units must return to the force pool of their home state. Prisoners may not be traded to the countermix. Yeah, that's eliminating civilian population, essentially. After all equal and additional exchange agreements are completed, any remaining prisoners stay in the prisoner box another year. When a state's conquered or becomes voluntarily neutral, all of its imprisoned units are immediately returned to the force pool of their home state. The way that's worded sounds like they just released their prisoners, but they may have some being held. I don't know if that's the way the old rules worked. Kept the wording the same, which to me means that the victor is able to hold on to their prisoners. Okay. Foreign wars. During the Napoleonic Wars, England became involved with a war with the United States, Russia with wars with Turkey. Russia went to war with Sweden shortly after Tilsit, resulting in the Finnish War. There was an Irish rebellion in 1798, which left things questionable. So here are a number of rules about that. Each January during alliance phase, the French player rolls 2 separate dice. The first one is a 1. England is at war with the United States. During the next production phase, the English player must remove 4 infantry, 2 fleets, and 2 transports into the at war section. This is modified by the commerce rules as well. If the second die roll is a 1, Russia is at war with Turkey. During the next production phase, the player who controls Russia has to remove 10 infantry, 4 cav, but it could be Cossacks, and a Russian leader with a value of 2. And we got off-map boxes for these. We got one for Ireland too, and we'll talk about that when we get there. I think we got one for Sweden up here. Remember there's a Swedish war? Okay. Which is in Finland, which is not on the map for the most part. A little bit of Finland up there, so you can actually march over to Sweden. Looks deformed. The original game, I don't think, had that connection. So you couldn't land march to Sweden. You had to do it navally if you wanted to invade them. There are reasons Russia might want to conquer Sweden rather than... Well, in the original game, you kind of had to. Okay. And Denmark would never go pro-French in the original game, because why would the English invade Denmark? Okay. Yeah, but they've fixed those things. While at war with Turkey, Kiev is not considered a Russian production city except for purposes of determining the conquest of Russia. It's merely a penalty in production for being at war, i.e. points supporting the war. Each turn while at war, the English player and the Russian player can roll dice during the alliance phase to try to end the war. The English player may not roll for the Russian war and vice versa. Okay, great. Thanks. You roll 2 dice, you need a 12. And that'll return all the units in the at war box from the map. At any production city of the home country of the returning units, the Russian player can designate one production point per turn to modify that die roll for Turkey. I'm guessing that's not the Kiev point. If the point is designated for use, if the roll is 11 or greater, the war ends. But during the production phase, the Russians lose another production point. Units required for foreign war may not be removed from the map while besieged. If the required force is not available on the map, the player must remove them from the force pool. If they still can't meet it, they're going to have to deploy them before they can build any new units, basically. There may be only one war between England and the US. The English player ends the war against America. They don't have to roll again. There's no limit to the number of Turkish wars, however. All right, special rules for certain nations in the political stuff. And this is where my rule book ends. There's a page, there's 4 pages essentially missing. One sheet that was in the staple thing. And we can try to guess what's in there. But what we notice is this goes to 10. I'm missing production. Let's take a look, because we're going to get to this rule book very, very shortly. Got naval, we got alliance. So, how minor states are created and conquered is going to be in here. The production, the reinforcements and replacements is going to be in there. And this is the Spanish and Portuguese production where I pick up again with the rules. So I'm missing a couple of key things. Those could have changed. I don't know how likely it is. And it probably doesn't affect much. So other than, is there anything after Ireland in this section? I'm not sure, but I don't think I lose too much. It's just, you know, most of what is here is like specific to the production of the game as a whole. But in this particular case, you know, they shipped me an inferior product. I'm sure if I had caught it, you know, within the first year or something, I would have been able to get a replacement. But now I'm not even getting a reply from them. Maybe they're looking into it. They've got a small staff, whatever. But yeah, I mean, it was not obvious until I finally dug the game out and started playing it. Or, you know, yeah, actually, I started reading these rules before, the campaign rules, because they were what I was most interested in. And I didn't get very far because the victory conditions just kind of floored me. I was like, what the fuck is this? I'm thinking I can draw it up in a chart form and make something easier. And I may do that. As soon as I get those suckers in place, I'm almost out of battery again. Let me swap. Denmark. Denmark begins the game as a neutral minor. Their political status is subject to change. During the alliance phase in the pro-French player segment, if both Austria and Prussia have been conquered at least one time, the pro-French player may attempt to change the political status of Denmark by rolling the die as part of the alliance phase. The alliance die roll modifier is used. If the modified result is 0 or less, the political status of Denmark is immediately altered. If the state is currently neutral, it becomes pro-French. If the state is anti-French, it becomes neutral. So, there is some use to these, and yep, I fixed them. Sweden. Historically, Sweden was forced into the continental system. By the way, historically, Sweden, I think, was pro-French initially, but not very much so. By Russia following the Treaty of Tilsit. Really? This resulted in a war between Sweden and Russia. The Congress of Erfurt occurred during the Finnish War. The war lasted February 1808 to September 1809. I don't understand what matters to Congress, but I'm not familiar with that one. Following the Treaty of Tilsit, the Swedish forces in Swedish Pomerania evacuated and returned home. Marshal Brun completed the occupation of Swedish Pomerania in 1807. Sweden begins the game as a neutral minor. Sweden's political status is subject to change through attack, as detailed above. I guess that you can just declare war on them. During the alliance phase, in the pro-French players segment, both Austria and Prussia have been conquered in at least one time, and Russia is either neutral or pro-French. The pro-French player may attempt to change the political status of Sweden by rolling the die. If they roll a 0 or less, again, all those things matter, as do city points, and maybe victory points, but they only happen if you beat Napoleon. And seem to last forever, which feels, I don't know, once Napoleon's beaten. If the modified result is 0 or less, the political status is immediately altered. If the state is currently neutral and Swedish Pomerania contains Swedish strength points, the units must be evacuated as soon as possible. If the state is currently neutral and Swedish Pomerania contains no Swedish strength points, Sweden becomes pro-French. So, if the state is neutral and Swedish Pomerania contains strength points, the units must be evacuated. The way this is worded is weird. If the modified result, the status is altered. If the state is currently neutral and Swedish Pomerania has troops, yeah, I think the first time you force the withdrawal of Swedish troops, and then once they're out of there, you can bring Sweden into your camp. If forced to evacuate Swedish Pomerania, the Swedish transport must be used during the neutral naval movement segment to enact it. If Sweden becomes pro-French, the Russian player is at war with Sweden. Now, this can only happen if Russia is neutral or pro-French. This is weird, but let's hold up, because it's not a regular war. During his next production phase, the player who controls Russia must remove the following forces, put them at the at-war Russian force pool display. It's actually not. It looks like, maybe this was supposed to be that, but they put these boxes on the map instead. They're just copying the old rules, but there weren't old rules for Sweden, so they're copying them from something else. 5 infantry, 1 cav. It could be a Cossack and a Russian leader with leadership value of 2. Each turn while at war, the Russian player can roll on a 12. The war ends and he gets his stuff back at any production city. He can designate 1 production point per turn to modify the roll, which drops it to an 11. But he doesn't get the production during the production phase. The war can be terminated by a conquest of Sweden, however. So you could just... See, here's the problem. Some of your forces will be over there in the Swedish box. There may be only 1 war between Russia and Sweden during the game. If the Russian player ends the war against Sweden, he need not roll for future conflict. The Sweden marker is placed in the active side up. When the war ends, flip to the final peace side. That just means there's only one of those box wars. You can still invade it normally. So the only way to get Sweden as a pro-Russian power, which is what its countermix is colored as, boy, that's kind of annoying because the Russians can go to war with Sweden, right? Like, I'm not talking about the box war. I don't care about that. But the Russians might well be invading Sweden. And this was true in the original game as well. The only thing is the counters were much more distinguishable. The leader has a band on him. That's probably good enough. But the actual Swedish troops are over here, and they look essentially the same as the Russian troops. I really hate the coloring choices they made in this. I can see under good light. In the counter trays, not so well. But the Prussians are this kind of muted gray instead of the darker gray that they used to be. They really should be kind of a bluish gray, but we'll leave that alone because that could confuse with the French. But they managed to make the Russians a color that is close enough that in the dark shadows of my counter trays, it is hard to understand what's going on. And given that they're printed with white values anyway, that darker green just works better. I can show you. If you're not familiar with the original, the French. Here's the Russian units, and the Swedes have this gold on them. They're a little bit more distinguishable. Here are the Prussian units. Another thing I used to do is I used to distinguish the nationality of Landwehr. If, for example, the Austrians needed needed to use Landwehr for Bavarians, I had little B's on the back side of the counters. You can't do that anymore. There were plenty of counters for it. It was not an issue in terms of counter mix. Remember, it was called War and Pieces for a reason. It had, I don't remember, 3,000 counters or something. It was just 2,000 maybe. I don't know. I think 2,000. It was just huge compared to, I don't know. Anyway, yeah. So the only way you can get Sweden as an anti-French power is through actually attacking it. And Sweden historically was an anti-French power. I'm not sure the Russians conquered Sweden. Like, this doesn't make it sound like, this Finnish war does not make it sound like Sweden was completely conquered. Yet they became an anti-French power. And this is a problem with this game. I think a number of others as well. Empires in Arms, it's possible to draw Sweden into your orbit, but like the only way you get it is if the French end up attacking it, basically. I don't know. I have a memory of a game where there were Spanish troops in Sweden, so conquering it. They wanted the Navy. Which is why France wants it, or Russia, or anyone. But in this game, if France got it, they would have to use their very limited militia as strength points for it, which just feels weird. Like, if anyone but Russia gets it, like if Prussia conquers Sweden somehow or another, they would have Landwehr there, you know. I much prefer, and I wish this system had done that. They could have easily done it. They could have made all the minor powers have their own intrinsic forces the way they do in most other games. They do in Nations in Arms. They do in Empires in Arms. Okay. Ireland. This is where my rules run out. Historically, the Irish Rebellion was inspired by both the French Revolution and the new American democracy and broke out in the spring of 1798. England responded, and it was quickly stopped. The French arrived late with a force under General Humbert, along with Grouchy. It was shortly forced to lay down its arms. Following the rebellion, the Irish Parliament was dissolved and Ireland became part of the United Kingdom in 1801. The rebellion was but a memory. I mean, it's only 4 years ago. That's like, saying the pandemic is but a memory, I guess, but, However, it's possible the rebellion could have been renewed with a little outside assistance, and all French force can be transported to the Atlantic Sea zone and may disembark into Ireland. All campaign game naval rules apply to this action. Sounds almost impossible, but okay. Following this disembarkation, the French player immediately rolls 2 dice. The roll is modified by +1 for each strength point present, I guess. And then what? And I don't know. If it feels like a valid option, I could do something. It probably would take less troops. It took 1,100 the first time. Do we have a scale here? I'm pretty sure we do, but I'm not so certain I can find it. Yeah, I don't see it. This is on the map. Oh yeah, each infantry or cav strength point is about 5,000. So, I mean, what I'm thinking, I got no idea. I got no idea. Basically, you'd probably want more troops than the French have in there. Whatever, a strength point of infantry is more than put down the original revolt, so maybe give them like a +1 for each additional strength point that they throw in there. I got no idea, and they need to roll a 12 to end it. And it would just destroy all the French units. Again, I have no idea what their rules are for it. It feels like it's meant to be one of these foreign wars, but on the other hand, maybe not. Maybe each month, you know, the French and the British fight battles, and that's all that happens. You don't really feel like that's a revolt then, though. Get over here. Got markers for the foreign wars, typhus, all kind of little event counter spots. All right. What that means is we're going to be moving to over here. Look how easy this is. Compared to this. Like, this is just trivial to read. And the map is equally trivial to read. The map's got more color in it, just a tiny bit. Like, I think the swamps are kind of bluish or something. All right, we're going to come back for how minor states are created. I can always use a pause. I got 2 batteries on charge. This one's not ready to die yet, but I might as well get it charging. What is wrong with my chest? I think it's from sleeping. I sleep on the floor. Carpeting and some padding under me. And have, you know, really, Jesus, since I was in my early 20s. But I feel like maybe it's not working anymore and I need to get something under me. Because this is not good. But because when I first get up is when it hurts the most. I don't know, maybe there's a wrinkle under me or something. Those usually don't bug me too much. All right. Minor states. Dalmatia, Poland, Naples, Rhine Confederation, and Westphalia can only be created by the French player. Poland is going to be a special case. It's handled differently in those rules, but not in this section. For Dalmatia, it's created when the pro-French forces occupy Trieste. And they get Dalmatian French satellite units already set up over there on the force pool, upside down, well, rotated. Poland is created when pro-French forces occupy Warsaw. They've baked it into the Treaty of Tilsit, which is something new in the new rules. I don't feel like that's appropriate. I feel like Poland should still be created when the pro-French forces occupy Warsaw, and then the Treaty of Tilsit moment is when you make a decision as to whether to continue supporting Poland or not. I prefer these rules because you'll probably choose the historical option anyway, which works with them. The reason for this is the Polish troops were available immediately, and part of the reason why Russia agreed to a peace. Just what Greater Poland might be is nasty. I think it includes this piece of Galicia or whatever, but there aren't enough rules to like justify it. Like you'd have to seize that. Okay. Naples is created when pro-French forces occupy Florence. Now, on the original map, it didn't go down to Naples. I'm going to say when they occupy Naples. The French actually start set up in Florence. I got to check this, if it's in the old rules too. Actually, well, unless it's in the Austerlitz scenario. I can't imagine that it would be, but maybe. Start with troops in Florence in the Grand Campaign in this. So they immediately create Naples. I'm going to force them to actually march down and create it. I'm not going to put any troops down there or anything. None are listed as being present in this one. That's fine. The French player uses the French satellite units with an N. The Rhine Confederation is created when pro-French forces occupy Frankfurt. This is a pretty minor Rhine Confederation concept. It's just, you know, some units from the Holy Roman Empire area. These were basically such small states, many of them dependent on the empire itself, like directly subordinated to the empire. Some of them patchworks of territories owned by other people, probably including parts of Hesse and stuff like that. Empires in arms. I don't remember what Nations in Arms had. Empires in Arms has a much, much better situation where you basically have to take over North Germany. And once you have all of it, you can create the Rhine Confederation. And it's a special thing, and it makes your troops better. Westphalia is created when pro-French troops occupy Brunswick and Kassel. Kassel's in Hesse. Brunswick's next to it. Okay, fine. You know, again, they have their own special units. And I don't think that you get French units for just owning Hesse or just owning Brunswick. But, again, not absolutely clear. Right now, those are Prussian. As is Westphalia. The actual Westphalia over here is also Prussian. I don't remember the creation of Westphalia. Anyway, at the start of the game, Holland is a French satellite known as the Batavian Republic. The production city is Amsterdam. The French player uses H units for this. If Brussels and Amsterdam are occupied by anti-French forces, Holland is created, and the English player can use English satellite units. However, somebody else uses something else. Here I have, I don't know, I have some note which may indicate that there aren't enough troops. I had trouble where, like, I've already had trouble with the counters, where, like, Swedish ships, I thought they were Russian, and I deployed them as the Russians, and then I couldn't find the Swedes when I was looking for the Swedes. The minors are really too hard to distinguish in this version. So far, there is very little to recommend this. You could strip away those the victory conditions and a few other special rules out of the Grand Campaign, and I think the original edition will work just fine. How states are conquered. Briefly, when all a state's production cities are controlled by foreign units, the state is conquered. A couple of exceptions. France is conquered if there's one supplied unbesieged anti-French strength point inside Paris at the end of a combat phase. Paris alone is enough. England, Spain, and Portugal are conquered if there's one foreign strength point in every city hex in the country at the end of the combat phase. When a major state is conquered, I don't know my choices. I didn't usually mark up rule books like this. This one was problematic enough for me at my very young age when I got it. The state immediately becomes a neutral power and may not join either the pro or anti-French for at least 1 year, nor may either faction roll for the state during the alliance phase until 1 year after the turn in which it was conquered. All units of the conquered state which are not inside its borders are automatically removed from the map board and put in the force pool. The faction which conquered the state can take control of any city in the conquered state at the instant any unit controlled by the conquering faction enters the city hex, unless the city is occupied by units of the opposing faction. If the hex contains only units controlled by the conquered state, these units are removed from the map and placed in the force pool of the conquered state. Units of the conquering faction must immediately vacate the capitals, though, on the first possible movement phase. So basically, you can occupy the entire enemy territory. Units of both pro and anti-French factions can freely move through the conquered territories and may move or trace supply through hexes occupied by units controlled by the conquering state. Neither faction may attack units of the conquered state while the state remains neutral. It becomes kind of like Poland in the 7 Years' War. While the conquered state remains neutral, it is not subject to attrition. The conquered state may receive production points from capitals and any other production cities which are not controlled by foreign forces, and may use these points to purchase reinforcements. I don't think that the conquered state can be pushed out of their cities by their former allies. If the capital of a major state is controlled by the opposing faction during any alliance phase, I'm sorry, I missed one. 1 year after the turn in which a major state is conquered, it becomes subject to normal alliance rules. If an individual player controls it, they can join either faction or remain neutral. If it's not controlled by a player, both sides roll for it. Everything's controlled by a player under the new rules. Well, in any of the scenarios except the two-player scenario. If the capital of a major state is controlled by the opposing faction during an alliance phase, the player who controls the state may sue for peace. If the faction which controls the capital accepts it, the state is considered conquered and all of the above restrictions are immediately imposed. If the faction which controls the capital rejects it, the state remains at war until it is conquered, as noted in 1, which was all production cities. When a minor state is conquered, all units of the force pool of the minor state are immediately replaced by an equal number of strength points to represent the new conquering state. You roll a die. If you get less than 4, the minor state's units are all demobilized, put back in the force pool. Otherwise, they stay on the map as the new power. These units can be displaced if they're in with units they shouldn't be stacked with. Italy, Portugal, Poland, and Spain are never removed by being conquered if they're pro-French. All right, reinforcements and replacements. We've got over here forces of various types in the force pool. And these are the limits of what you can build. And each year they increase, potentially. Not much for Spain. And you're able to buy them with your production points. Now, something I did not remember, the way production points work is, I'm not going to read through all of this. I already have pretty much said it. The way production points work is you can buy units. We got costs for units. Guard infantry, regular cav. Okay. Guard cav are not on here. That was always a problem. Guard infantry or regular cav cost 2. I think I made guard cav cost 3. Only France and Russia have them. Regular infantry or Cossack cav costs 1. Landwehr partisans, Landwehr militia or partisans cost a half a production point each. Now, in general, you get 1 production point from each of your production cities, but if you roll a 5 or a 6 on your production phase, which is every turn, you get 2 points per city. And I think this applies to miners too, because otherwise they couldn't build their cav ever. There are some modifiers to that die roll, which we'll get to as we go. The production points received from a city with black infantry production. That is indeed black. Trieste doesn't? Prague is, okay. Yeah, so they're sitting on 1, 2, 3. Trieste is not a production city for Austria. That's what it is. Okay. It's only for Dalmatia. Well, let's make sure of that over here. Vienna, Budapest, Prague, and Innsbruck. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I thought they only had 4. So the production points that you get, you can spend immediately. They're pretty much wasted, although there are certain cases where you can store production points. A red infantry symbol can be used to purchase any kind of unit. The black can only be used to produce Landwehr. Does that work? Yeah. France can use any 3 major cities in France as production cities in addition to Paris. A city which is controlled by an enemy force cannot function. They can differ during different turns. Brussels is not automatically a production city. It is only a production city because of, to allow you to create Holland. Is that indeed Brussels? Wow, that's deep in. Okay. Minor states have no production capacity while they're neutral. They can only be used to purchase units from that state's force pool. I think the same is true with the majors. They can't buy minor production points. But maybe I'm missing something. You wouldn't really want to. Oh, I missed something here. If a production city in a major state is controlled by an enemy force, the state gets no production. The French player's die roll is increased by 1 if Napoleon is in Paris. The Russian's player die roll is increased by 1 if there are 20 or more enemy army strength points on map board 4. And those map boards are still mostly the same. They changed some of the definition to them. That's fine. Let's see. Yeah. In addition, during any single reinforcement phase, units may only be purchased from one state in each of the 4 minor state groups. Thus, if the French controls Milan and Florence, he may purchase either Italian or Naples units, but not both during the same reinforcement phase. This would also hold true if 2 different anti-French forces controlled these production cities. Thus, the players who compose the anti-French faction must jointly agree which minor state will purchase units. Each major state uses special units for minors which it has under control. When a minor state is controlled by a major state, the appropriately colored satellite units are used. If controlling major state does not possess satellite units for a minor, Landwehr militia or Cossacks are used to represent the force of that minor state. This is really weird. Like Cossacks being formed in Germany because of Russia. I really dislike that, but if the anti-French faction controls both Brunswick and or Hanover, the production points from these cities can be used to produce English satellite units bearing a K, King's German Legion. I think that's if any country controls them. Spanish and Portuguese production. Hey, we're back on the rules. This seems like a good place to stop because I'm low on battery. That battery's done. I can charge this one. Okay, so we're on the back half of the campaign rules. Spanish and Portuguese production. So, if they're invaded by a foreign army, sorry, I have a blanket around me. The invaded state joins the faction opposed to the invading force, and it becomes subject to special production rules. These remain in effect as long as there are any foreign army units controlled by the opposing faction inside their borders. Spanish and Portuguese militia and partisans can only be purchased if there's opposing foreign armies inside their borders. England can lend production points to either Spain or Portugal. I talked about this with naval transport. There are limits on what they can ship, but anyway. Each English production point is equivalent to 6 native production points, which is the equivalent to an infantry, which normally costs 1. England can lend each country a maximum of 2 production points per turn. I think to normal countries they can lend equal to the red production cities that the country has. It's covered in the naval rules in the transport. English production points lent to Spain or Portugal should be kept track of on a sheet of paper separately from the native production points, recorded on the production track, printed on the campaign game card. Yeah, but they'll probably use them right away. Spanish production points may not be used to purchase infantry or cav unless there are no militia or partisans left. Spain gets production points for each city in Spain which is not occupied by a pro-French unit, and Portuguese points for each city in Portugal which is not occupied by a pro-French unit. I think that's an error. I don't know if it's introduced by the new rules. Fuck. Son of a bitch. I look like Mother Mary right now. They go to scenario 8, so it probably got pulled in from the Peninsular War. And it is basically one player here, so it might have actually been in here. But anyway, they make it clear that you can only buy Portuguese unit with Portuguese points and Spanish units with Spanish points. They might be different players. Of course, in the multiplayer game or in a game where Spain is invaded, I think under all circumstances, I don't know, the Spanish I don't know. I guess England could invade Spain, and it would trigger this. But in the multiplayer game, in any of the multiplayer games, England and Spain are the same player. And England controls Portugal. So it kind of works out. Where did we go? Yeah. You get production points. Let's see. The Spanish and Portuguese city markers are used to mark the number of production points that each country has available. At the start of the scenario, there's 20 Spanish and 4 Portuguese production points, but these are special production points. And whenever the French occupy a major city, it drops it by 2. When they get a minor city, it drops it by 1. And then they're going to be able to buy forces from here. Yeah, they actually specify here that Spain and Portugal buy their own troops. And then again, it repeats what it said before. Portuguese and Spanish, except now it's about Portuguese as well, may not be used to purchase infantry or cav unless there are no militia or partisans left. The active player can buy cav replacements by making a down payment of half the normal purchase cost. And there's mechanisms to handle that. There's a production track over here. It's also used for British production. Portuguese and Spanish infantry, cav, and militia may be deployed in any city in their home country which is not occupied by French. Partisans may be deployed in any unoccupied mountain or city hex in their home country. No more than 2 production strength points can be deployed in any single hex. I don't know what that really means. Like, could you buy 2 cav? Yeah, maybe. If a non-French strength point is inside Madrid during the non-French player's production phase, he gets 1 strength point of Spanish militia from the Spanish force pool. This is not clear. And again, I wonder if this is somewhere else. But the French have a Spanish unit and a Portuguese unit. And that's what I feel like this is referring to. But then, note, the blue satellite Spanish infantry unit is automatically added to the French force pool the instant the French unit enters Madrid. It sounds like it might be a separate thing. The blue satellite Portuguese infantry is automatically added to the French force pool. And again, there's nothing about Lisbon up here. I think it's just intended to give a strength point of pro-French forces there. I don't think it takes a militia unit away from the nation, but it might. And I'm absolutely certain that they don't get a militia unit in addition to the gold unit. But how it's written, it sounds like they actually get an extra militia unit from Spain that's yellow, like the captured fleets and all that shit, that are not going to be happy, or I'm not going to be happy with it. Special English production rules. Unlike other states, England now may accumulate its production points and lend them to other major or minor states, transporting them to any port or coastal hex in the receiving state. The maximum number of production points which England may accumulate is 5. There's a marker for this. The maximum number which they may lend to a state may not exceed the maximum number of production points the receiving state can generate from its own red symbol cities. I'm assuming not the doubled value, but I don't know. They can produce twice as much. The maximum number of production points, it's not going to be an issue. England doesn't have so much wealth that it can, that it really needs to do that. But the maximum number of production points which may be used to purchase units from the English force pool is 2 for land units and 5 for naval. So even if they get their double die roll, they will not be able to build a big army quickly. Portsmouth is a special production city. It generates only points that can be built English or English satellite naval units. There's a separate marker to accumulate naval production, and production points generated by other cities can be used for naval production, though. Within the limits of the counters provided, the English player may add one naval unit to the English force pool during each January production. France can do the same thing. It's in there. The purchase unit is deployed at Portsmouth. The French production, France can accumulate its naval production points. This, I think, is new. I don't think they were allowed to do this before, but they have a heavy production. The maximum number of production points which France can accumulate is 5. There's a marker for this. They can purchase units from the French force pool, but they can only spend 5 for naval units on any given turn. There's no limit for land units. Naval units, we haven't gotten to their cost yet. Antwerp and Toulon are special production cities. These two cities combine for 1 naval production point. Sort of, kind of, it's weird. It's like they're not a half each. The production points generated by them may only be used to purchase or replace French or French satellite naval units. There's a separate marker allowing the French player to accumulate naval production points on the production track. Production points generated by other cities can be used for naval production. Within the limit of the counters provided, so long as either Antwerp or Toulon is controlled by France, they get a point. So they kind of don't combine. You can choose one. Within the limits of the counters provided, the French player may add 1 naval unit each year. Yep. Naval unit can be purchased from the French force pool at a cost of 5 regular and or naval production. Naval unit replacement, when they're sunk, they're put in the force pool. During your production phase, the active player may purchase a naval unit from a state's force pool for a cost of 5 regular and or naval. He can purchase a regular naval unit from the force pool on a monthly installment plan. You pay 1 production point. You place the naval unit on the production track on the box numbered 5. During each production phase after that, you can pay 1 or more additional points and buy a unit, move the unit's corresponding thing down boxes until it reaches the 1, then it's maybe removed from the map and placed on the board. Spanish and Portuguese production points may be used to purchase naval units from the state's force pool. The total cost to purchase such a unit is 30 native production points against 5 times the cost of an infantry. Okay. The naval force pools, unlike the land force pools, and there may be a few little exceptions where there's very, very tiny numbers of units. But the naval force pool is allowed to grow beyond the size that it can actually exist on. So you got to be kind of careful about that. There are 2-point and 1-point naval units. They're not backsided, so you don't have that issue. But you might have an issue where, like, you have a 2-point unit and you need to break it down and you don't have pieces for it or something. So that's kind of a thing that we do have to worry about. Landwehr. Mass conscription of Austria and Prussia were an attempt to emulate the French practice. Austria's large-scale conscription was established with the patent of June 1808. Prussia, more entrenched in past glories, was slower. There's 2 states which may produce Landwehr. No, there's also England somehow. And I don't know where they come from. They have one to start in their force pool and they get another one at some other point. You could say, well, they're Hanoverian. Yeah, but they have Hanoverian troops if they control it, and they have King's German Legion. I really don't know what the fuck the Landwehr are in their force pool. Anyway. But they have a few. These units should be added to the appropriate force pool in the manner explained below. Once available in the force pool, the Landwehr may be purchased and deployed on the map during production like any other unit. If none are available, the production points from the cities with black Landwehr are lost. You can't store them. Austria is currently an anti-French power beginning in June 1808. 1 Austrian Landwehr point is added every month, as long as they're anti-French. And it just accumulates in their force pool. It doesn't go away or whatever when they become pro-French. Prussia has to be an anti-French power beginning immediately after Prussia has become anti-French for the second time. 2 Prussian landwehr, though, are added each month, I guess. But there's an exception referring to Poland, above. Poland is not above. Poland, well, maybe it is. Maybe it is. There's more Poland back here somewhere under the Treaty of Tilsit, but the creation of Poland is not handled there. And maybe, like, Poland takes away the landwehr capability. I don't think Königsberg is part of it, but anyway. France. There's a rule for France. This was the production stuff, I guess. During the first turn in which any hex in France is occupied by an enemy unit, the French player receives 2 strength points of French partisans. They can be deployed in any forest, mountain, or city. You don't pay for these. They may never occupy the same hex as any other unit. They work like other partisans do. I haven't explained them yet. They're not subject to attrition. They may not be overrun, and they have a base morale of 0. During their movement phase, they can move a maximum of 1 hex. During combat, they may initiate combat and be attacked by an opposing force. A partisan, however, is capable of evading combat. If they're attacked in a non-clear terrain hex, they immediately withdraw into an adjacent hex, thus avoiding combat. If a partisan is attacked in a clear terrain hex, though, it can only withdraw if there's no cav facing it. If a partisan is eliminated, it may be replaced during the next production phase. And it just looks like it's free. Partisans can't leave their home country. Napoleon's abdication and exile. This is different. If France is conquered, the following French units are immediately removed. Napoleon, a leader 0, and a guard infantry. Put the marker on the production track on 12. Move it down once at the start of each French alliance phase. While Napoleon is in exile, France is a conquered state and a neutral power, subject to the restrictions of Section I, which is an enforced neutrality. It's only going to last a year. So, in addition, French units may not be moved while Napoleon is in exile. After Napoleon's exile, all non-French units must leave France as rapidly as possible and may not re-enter unless Napoleon has returned from exile. Antwerp and Brussels are controlled by England. Okay. I didn't realize Antwerp was not part of Batavian Republic. I assume some of the territory between them is too, you know? During each pro-French player's segment after Napoleon has been in exile at least 3 turns, the French player may roll the die to attempt to return Napoleon to France. This die roll is decreased by 1 for each major and minor state that is pro-French without France. France is neutral. And once more for every 3 months Napoleon has been in exile. If the modified result is 0, the French player must immediately deploy Napoleon and the other exiled units to any port in France within the Mediterranean Sea Zone. If the August 1815 turn ends, the game ends regardless of whether or not Napoleon has returned. After Napoleon has remained in exile for a year, the marker on the production track has been moved below the 1. The French player must deploy Napoleon and the other exiled units in any port in France within the Mediterranean Sea Zone. In the original game, Napoleon doesn't come back in that case. The game ends after a year in exile. However, the victory conditions in this give something special to Napoleon going into exile. And this is, I think, why Napoleon can't die in this game either. Because it's absolutely vital that, like, for those victory conditions, just the way they're crafted, it kind of pisses me off because I like the option that he can't make it back, but the victory conditions are, you know, so carefully wrought and so intricate that I don't want to fuck with them, and the only way to replace these rules would be to fuck with them. Upon returning to France, Napoleon's force, although Napoleon can get killed by his own troops, so upon returning to France, Napoleon's force receives a special movement allowance of 15 movement points. This movement allowance must be used immediately, and Napoleon must attempt to reach Paris by the most direct route. If Napoleon's force enters any hex containing an equal or smaller number of French strength points, the units immediately join Napoleon's force and continue moving. If he encounters a hex containing a greater number of French strength points, the French player rolls a die. If the result is 4 or less, the entire force joins Napoleon. If it's a 5, the force retreats 3 movement points. If it's a 6, Napoleon is shot and his force immediately stops moving. And I think the game ends, but see G below. If Napoleon is shot before reaching Paris, the game ends immediately. So I think you could end the game with Napoleon dying or failing to make it over, because it's the same as him being shot. So I don't know. Maybe I can tinker with it. If Napoleon enters Paris without being shot, France immediately becomes a pro-French power, and the game continues until August 1815. So the key here is that Napoleon has to go by the most direct route. So if there happen to be French troops placed in his way, wow, there's something weird going on out there. It's going. A really bright light, quite far away. I mean, like on the hills across the river from me. I think, I don't know. I don't know. Anyway. Anyway, if Napoleon enters Paris, you continue until the game reaches August 1815, or a player achieves an automatic victory. Bernadotte. During the pro-French production phase of August 1810, the French leader counter is permanently removed from play and replaced by Swedish Bernadotte, which is deployed in Stockholm. This is ignored if Bernadotte is dead. Pro-French expeditionary forces. Although all the European monarchies generally supported the war against France, minor Austrian, Prussian, and Spanish forces were requisitioned by Napoleon. If any major state that starts the game either neutral or anti-French, Spain is ineligible, but they got Spanish, becomes pro-French and is eligible for alliance phase die rolls, well, that's no one in the multiplayer game. The French player may attempt to form a pro-French expeditionary corps during the alliance phase in the pro-French players segment. I think I'm going to neglect that restriction and say that the French can do this even if somebody agrees to become pro-French. I'm getting weird bright lights coming through from far away. But he probably should have to take them in the first turn that they become eligible, and he can agree not to. Which is to say that if you make... Yeah, no. I don't know. Like the real expeditionary corps were taken from Austria and Prussia after they were defeated. They were forced to be pro-French, but they didn't really fight the war. They just gave those troops. So it really is the die roll thing. So maybe this I'll just skip this because this rule doesn't apply in the 5-player game. Okay. He chooses one eligible major state, makes a roll if the modified result is 0 or less. I don't see any modifiers. Just the political ones, the normal. If successful, he immediately rolls 2 dice to determine the number of infantry he may requisition from the allied state. The die roll is modified exactly as for an allied alliance phase die roll. If the modified result is 7 or greater, the French player gets an unnamed leader and a cav strength point in addition to 4 infantry. If it's 2 or less, they get 3 cav strength points with 12 infantry strength points. If the modified dice roll is between 3 and 6, they get 2 cav strength. This is just written in such a way that, like, yeah, if it happens, I look it up. I don't care. The requisition force may leave its home country but must maintain its own supply line. Should the home country of an expeditionary force become neutral or anti-French, the English player gains control of the force and it has to go home. French invasion of England. We're going to have to stop after that. Preparations were made prior to 1805 for a French invasion. The plan was to land near London, take the city, and supply the army from the land of the enemy. While it didn't take place, there's uncertainty how effective the transports were. The threat was taken very seriously by Great Britain. If at any time there are no unblockaded English squadrons in the North Sea, that's the case right now. No, they're in port. They're in the North Sea. Never mind. And blockading ports and stuff like that. So they're in the North Sea. And a French transport is located either at Boulogne or at sea in the zone. French army units may cross the English Channel during the ground movement phase with the following restrictions. This is new stuff. The old rules required you use your naval transports as normal. A maximum of 2 leaders may cross per turn, accompanied by up to a maximum ground forces that they can be accompanied by. That's 20 strength points generally, 22 maybe. No cav. Each moving leader's force must make an attrition roll and immediately remove the number of strength points. Only leaders located in the hex containing the city of Boulogne may cross the channel. Only hexes containing the brown-shaded coastal zones in England, I see 1. Yeah, I don't know. The only thing I see is this, which I think is just an uninhabitable island. I'm guessing it's these 2, because that's where the arrows go, kind of. I don't know. It's obviously not matching the map. How about that? Maybe the destination hex. The movement cost to cross is assumed to take all the movement of the army strength points. Once moved to a coastal hex in England, the unit is presumed to have no movement allowance remaining for the duration of the turn. It's also cut off from supplies, unless you can arrange them navally or something like that. But this gives France a way to cross the channel without having to utilize all of the naval rules. But they do have to get the English out of the North Sea. And right now, either the North Sea is empty, there's nothing at sea, but there are plenty of fleets. Nelson is here, but he starts in the Mediterranean in the base roles for the Grand Campaign. This is an optional naval setup. So the only other things that could be are all blockading, but I think they count as being in the North Sea as well. So as long as there's any ships there, you're not able to do this shit. All right. I am going to cut this at this point. We only have a couple more pages of rules left, I think. No, a lot. We have all the options and whatnot. I'm probably not going to finish this tonight. Yeah. Haven't been doing any gaming with other people recently. We tried to set one up, I think last week or something, but I guess it fell through. And the word I got back is I can't get anybody to commit. And I'm like, okay. I might be able to set something up again, but she was trying to move the day and whatnot, and that just caused issues. So, I don't know. Reports of doom and gloom in the weather seem to have cleared up. Today is actually relatively pretty, and I almost convinced myself to head out. But I still feel like shit. Between the pain... I wonder if that's an animal. No, it's... Is it? It's a stump. Between the pain and also I'm still sick. It's cold. But beyond all of that, I actually got an offer last night. I don't know if it'll work out. But I mentioned about maybe I said the whole thing. I mentioned about the gaming not getting together. Well, the same person who's been arranging gaming wanted to go for a walk, but also when I mentioned I have to try to figure out a time when I am going shopping, she offered to take me shopping. And honestly, I don't usually like jump at something like that, but with the cart, with the way I feel and everything, if we can work that out, that would be great. It's not a guarantee, but it's sort of a quid pro quo type thing, because she needs to do some tasks and has trouble going out on her own. So, yeah, I have a tendency to be around people who, have their own problems too that are pretty serious. I really wish this fucking would stop hurting. It's just so fucked up. Anyway, the Spanish alliance chart is what we're talking about now. I think that's this. Although Russia uses something similar, and I don't know why it's that. Spain starts pro-French. So this is kind of weird because, like in the old game, if Spain was a player, they wouldn't be restricted by this. But to try to give Spain freewheeling playerhood seemed like too much, I guess, for the system. Between the fact that they really don't have production cities available to them and stuff like that. Spain starts pro-French and remains a French ally until both Austria and Prussia have been conquered by France. Now, France can't win without conquering both of them, so, Which is weird, because to some extent, France should just win by being left alone. Regardless of current political status of either, or the July 1807 turn has completed, whichever comes first, at which time the Spanish alliance chart goes into effect. Exceptions, the invasions. During the next English alliance phase, following the completion of either of the conditions, the following procedure is followed. Spain is not eligible for alliance die rolls until it has been conquered by France at least once. That feels weird. See, the whole thing feels weird because, again, Spain, the whole Spanish situation, how they got pushed into being at war with France. You could argue that there were English machinations there, and that the diplomacy table essentially caused it. Place to marker 12. It's moved down under the following conditions. Once per Spanish naval squadron currently in the force pool at the moment the chart first goes into effect, i.e. they lost ships. Once per squadron that's lost. Once per squadron removed from the... you move it up for each squadron that you produce. You move down once for every 10 pro-French strength points in the boundaries of Spain. You move down once for every 10 pro-French strength points that enter Spain. How to deal with fractions and whatnot isn't clear here. Like, if I have 25, I think it moves down 2. if I move 5 more in, does it move down 1 or do I have to move 10 in? The way it's written, I'd have to move 10 more in. So I could have 29 sitting in there and only take the 2-point hit or whatever. Much less than that, I'm not going to take Portugal with, which is kind of the reason you've got troops in Spain. Move up once for every 10 pro-French strength points that exit Spain. And again, how do you track this? You're going to have to keep track of all kind of numbers here. If it happens kind of all at once, sure, but try to. Move up twice if anti-French forces initiate land combat against a hex containing a majority of Spanish strength points, 50% or more, okay, if you're being attacked. Move down once every month during the English player's alliance phase, so there's a timer on this. The marker can't be moved below 0 or above 12. If the condition requires movement below 0, I don't know how it goes above 12. I guess by working around the edges and trying to cheat the points that you have. If the movement goes below 0, if the condition requires movement below 0, move the marker to 0 and cease all other movement. If the condition requires movement above 12, move the marker to the 12th and continue with any other movement conditions. When the marker is moved to 0 value, Spain declares war on France and joins the English coalition. Spain will remain anti-French through the end of the game unless conquered. The Spanish alliance chart is not used for the remainder of the game. And remember, in the 5-player game and all multiplayer games, England owns Spain as soon as this happens. Before it happens, they're pro-French. In the 2-player game, this kind of takes more, this becomes somewhat different because you can't roll, it takes an additional effect because you can't roll on the alliance table on them. Spain becomes eligible for alliance die rolls if it has not been if it has been conquered by France at least once. I don't know. I like the simplicity of the idea behind the original game, where each player was their own, very much like Empires and Arms. But again, I can see the argument against that, and maybe it also couldn't be managed. Although, again, I think that's harder to express. I feel like these kind of rules are more necessary for the 2-player scenario, which had real problems. The multiplayer had problems too, but of a different nature. Partisans may be deployed in any mountain city. This is the same partisan rules that we had for the French. I'm not going to reread them. I don't know why it says partisans and militia, because militia have nothing to do with this. Okay, Austria, Prussia, and Russia. Each major state at the time has its own interests and in mind. Actions were taken, wars declared, etc. The following rules provide some structure for Austria, Prussia, and Russia. These are also new, and I don't know how much they apply or need to apply in a multiplayer game. Let's see. Austria is not eligible for alliance die rolls until conquered twice. Okay, they're not. They're just not in the multiplayer. After Austria is conquered for the first time and rebuilds its force pool, it will declare war on France in the neutral alliance phase that follows. I mean, okay, whatever. I don't like that being forced into that. I could see an argument that Austria might want to be pro-French. After being conquered a second time upon reconstruction of its force pool, it will be eligible for normal alliance phase rules, which is they make up their own mind. Prussia. This country may not become pro-French by alliance die rolls until after it has been conquered by France. Well, we're not using die rolls, so fuck that. A die roll may cause it to become anti-French, in which case another roll could return it to neutrality. Beginning in the third turn after the first conquest of Austria, or May 1806, whichever comes first. Yeah, we're going to remember all this. Prussia will roll 2 dice in each Prussian alliance phase. If necessary, place a Prussian flag on the production track on the 3 and move it down once for each English alliance phase. Yeah. You know what's really necessary is that May 1806, or the first conquest of Austria, if moved below 1, remove the flag and begin rolling the dice. The first time, a result of 2 will cause it to declare war on France. For the second die roll, a 3 or less, it just says a result of 2. I think they mean or less. A 3 or less will cause the war. For the third roll, a 4 or less causes the war, and so on until war is declared. This roll is made even if Prussia is currently anti-French for some other reason. Okay. After the occurrence of this special declaration of war, Prussia is not eligible for alliance die rolls until conquered by France. I feel like if there's a Prussian player alone, as in the 5-player game, this is kind of bullshit. Now, in the game where Austria and Prussia are both controlled by the same player, I'm okay with this, because it forces Prussia into actions that they wouldn't normally take. Upon reconstruction of its force pool after being conquered the first time, Prussia will be subject to alliance die rolls. Russia. This country is not eligible for alliance die rolls until both Austria and Prussia are simultaneously in a conquered state. Thereafter, it's eligible for the rolls. But again, the rolls only happen in the 2-player game. So, you know, once invaded by France, Russia will remain anti-French throughout the end of the game unless conquered. Again, I don't feel like the player should be that constrained. Like, that's going to really fuck up your ability to try to control things. Yeah, you can be anti-French and not support Prussia and Austria as you're trying to create the conditions in which they get destroyed. This is what's fucked up, though. Like, Austria and Prussia are probably going to have to win the war on their own, more or less. Because support from other powers is going to dry up because of that scripted nature of the victory conditions. Now, that support might dry up under the old rules as well. And under the old rules, you might see a point where it's like, Austria is going to win this game. We're not going to push for the destruction of France at this time. The one saving grace I had for the destruction of France situation was that I counted all the major cities in France. Now, this isn't spelled out in the rules in the original, but you can make an argument for it because any major city in France could be a production city. I counted them all as production cities. So that final rush for France, the last turn, grabbing a bunch of cities in France was worth something. And I think there may have been something that said Paris was worth too, but I don't remember. It feels like this isn't going to work right either in terms of the endgame stuff, and it feels actually more disturbing because in that original version, there was a reason that all the players would want to grab as much of France and take it down as hard as they can. But everything gets thrown into chaos by Napoleon being in exile and whatnot, which was an option then. All right. Once invaded, Russia will remain anti-French. After Russia has been, by the way, invaded doesn't mean just at war. They're at war all along. Invaded has some specific requirements, something like 20 strength points going into map 4 or something. Once it's invaded, if no pro-French units remain on Russian soil, Austria and Prussia will become neutral if currently pro-French. Again, I'm not sure that as players, like, these rules appear to apply no matter what. I am going to apply them, They can always reverse them with the normal, but it could be kind of painful. Thereafter, they are not eligible for alliance die rolls, which doesn't say they're not eligible to make decisions. Except Austria is absolutely neutral. What? Units of both sides must leave or declare war. Prussia is neutral, but both sides can enter freely. I guess that's all they mean, is that Prussia can be penetrated. Prussian units are ignored by both sides. Whenever Berlin, Königsberg, and Warsaw are all controlled by the anti-French, Prussia will declare war on France and remain anti-French until the end of the game. That's making it sound like the anti-French have to be able to push the Prussians out. No, they're ignored by both sides. I guess that means you can stack with them. Okay. Fair enough. I mean, I don't know about controlled, but like, as long as they're in them all. Prussia will declare war on France and remains anti-French until the end of the game. Again, this is forcing the situation. And I don't know how I feel about this kind of scripting of player behavior. The turn after this happens, Austria will begin to roll 2 dice each alliance phase. A result of 2 on the first turn, a roll of 3 or less on the second, etc., causes it to declare war on France and remain anti-French for the rest of the game. So I kind of feel like you're forced to do that final coalition. You're not forced to support it, but you're forced into it at the end of the game. I don't know. Keeps the historical. Cossacks possess a basic morale of 0 at the start of any round of combat if committed force. Like, this should not be in Russia, like in the Russian political rules. This should be some in the military stuff. Cossack units possess a basic morale of 0 at the start of any round of combat. If a committed force contains Cossacks, the Cossack strength points may withdraw unless the opposing force contains a larger number of cavalry strength points. I mean, that should just be part of the regular rules. It shouldn't be tucked away in the political rules for the campaign game. Austria, Prussia, and Russia. When any of these major states become pro-French, the French player may not move any of their ground or naval units. That's fine, unless the units are part of a pro-French expeditionary force. That requires alliance rolls and stuff. I mean, maybe you can take them from them. I'm just thinking, if they voluntarily become pro-French, as opposed to being forced to somehow, and I don't know how they're being forced to, because the alliance die roll is what causes them to be pro-French, and like, in the multiplayer game, there's a player making that decision. What the hell is that? There are weird lines. I think they're just artifacts of the light. Now I got lost in my train of thought, didn't I? Got derailed. I mean, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. It's like a line going up there. But I move over here, and it's not there. And I move over here, and it's not there. There's this line, that's the stupid hard maps. So what was I saying? Damned if I know. Yeah, I don't know. There's just like... Yeah, it had to do with if a country is pro-French voluntarily, can the French still roll on the alliance table to try to get them to pump, to give them an expeditionary corps? Sure, that might make sense. But boy, that's kind of dicky, and I don't know if I'd want to voluntarily be pro-French in those circumstances, you know? I mean, like, you take my troops, I stop being pro-French, and now my troops come back. Anyway, I don't know. When any of these states become pro-French, the English player may move any one leader with any combination of up to 10 infantry or cav strength points per English ground movement. When any of these become pro-French, the English player may move any one leader with any combination of up to 10 strength points per English ground movement phase unless the unit is part of a pro-French expeditionary force. So you can fiddle around with the rest of the forces. Again, I leave that up to the nation. These rules don't work except as written, except in the two-player game. And there's not any kind of, hey, don't use these if it's not the two-player game. But I think you have to use some of them, but some of them just don't work. The English being able to move things around doesn't make sense if there's an Austrian player. If the state is invaded, the French player may move all of the Allied states' units anywhere within their home country. Only a pro-French expeditionary force may leave their home country, i.e. invaded by the anti-French, because they are pro-French. Okay. Now we have, and again, this is just so Byzantine and so convoluted, and I'm not really sure it's going to generate the situation that we want, but we'll try as best as we can to play it as written. We're going to swap batteries because I'm still here to read. We'll stop at the optional rules, I guess. One thought that ran through my mind is I don't want to have a heart attack climbing my hill because I could be found and brought to the hospital. I don't think this is heart related at all. But I did have those thoughts pretty heavily on my way to dancing, and I was very worried, although I couldn't give up dancing. I was, making contingency plans of, wow, if things start getting really, really painful, I have to try to make it home, even if it means leaving early or whatever. Anyhow, we got a few more of these. The Peace of Pressburg. If Austria is conquered by pro-French forces, the French player may enact the Peace of Pressburg. The French player must declare the enactment. If it's not declared by the end of the following French alliance phase, it cannot be enacted for the remainder of the game. The following treaty may be imposed. Now, we don't have the conquest rules in the modern game. Those are in the missing pages that I'm using the old rules for, and they may lead some light to this. Venice is ceded to the Kingdom of Northern Italy. Innsbruck is ceded to either Bavaria or France at the French player's option. An anti-French state may reverse this treaty by conquering the aforementioned minor states. Now, Innsbruck doesn't do anybody any good because it's only a black production thing. So the key with that is you take it away from the Austrians. If you give it to Bavaria, which is what historically happened, they don't get production out of it, so it sucks. If you give it to France, it doesn't go away easily, I guess. I don't know. I mean, if Austria retakes Innsbruck, I feel like they should get it back. I don't know. Dalmatia, Trieste is automatic when you enter it. You're allowed to take one production city from a conquered player from this. Essentially, Innsbruck would be that production center that they take. The only other option would be Prague. And, I don't know. I feel like you should have to give it to Bavaria, but anyway. The biggest thing is it incorporates Venice, but Venice is not a production city either, so it really doesn't matter. All it does is change some borders. Now, what's weird about this is it just changes the city. And this was in the original game too a problem. It doesn't define that you gain the territory around that city. Now, for the year after you're conquered or whatever, well, maybe forever after you're conquered, you can be passed through by other players' units. So it kind of doesn't matter, I guess. And then if you're pro-French, the French can go through you. Plus, they have that. And once you go anti-French, you're at war again. So I don't know. All right. The Treaty of Tilsit. Russia starts anti-French and remains an enemy of France until both Austria and Prussia have been conquered by France at least one time, regardless of the political status of either. Again, it feels so scripted on the players. Like, yeah, this is gonna create something that follows the Napoleonic Wars a little more closely. Oh, but at what price? They have to have been conquered at least one time, and the Polish question has been answered. At this time, the Treaty of Tilsit can be enacted by the French. The French must declare the enactment. If it's not declared by the end of the following French alliance phase, it cannot be done for the rest of the game. The French decision regarding Poland determines the contents of the treaty. I still think Poland should be creatable temporarily in an automatic manner before Prussia surrenders. But anyway, no Poland. Russia will be neutral for at least 18 months from the treaty's inception. No one may attack her, and she is not eligible for an alliance die roll during this time. Put a Russian flag on the production at the 18 marker, so you can't use the Spanish one. And each month, you move the flag down until it is below 1, at which time Russia becomes eligible for alliance rolls normally. But again, it's the multiplayer game. So I'd say they become eligible to make themselves allies. Russia cannot accept English production until January 1811, kind of at random. And the Prussian city of Magdeburg, along with any other French supply source in Prussia, becomes French-controlled and a source of supply as per GCG 1.2 above. Now this is interesting. Oh, maybe it's I.2. Because 1.2 doesn't make sense. I went looking for that. What is I? G. I is the missing stuff. Oh no, I is Spain. Well, that's clearly not it. Yeah, and 1.2 doesn't make sense. It needs a letter to make sense. Is it immediately above? That would be 1. There's no 2. There's a B. It's talking about Austria being conquered. I got no idea what this is about. I suspect it's something else. And I'm going to look in the Conquest to see about sources of supply under Conquest in the original rules. Because I don't remember anything like that. But there sure the hell isn't anything in these because I'm missing the 4 pages that would contain it. There's nothing in the original. Now, what are supply sources normally in this game? Because maybe, let me see, page 9. Yep, we're going to lose these 2 pages too. Got to figure out a way to get them back in. Where are sources? I.2.C. That's pretty clearly an I. I.2.C. It's not right. Like I said, we go from I is Spain. Just not it. It's probably a typo for H. Just here. Let's look again. Here they won't be lettered the same. Ah! H2. A. The faction which conquered the state may automatically take control of any city in the conquered state at the instant the units they enter the city hex. The city is if the hex contains only units I am guessing that major cities now become, within a conquered state, now become supply sources. So why do we need a special rule for, what is it? For Magdeburg? Which is a major city? That's interesting. I think the fact that it becomes French controlled, so the Prussians have to leave Magdeburg. So if you don't create Poland, you get Magdeburg as a supply source. And you can try to gain other ones. Okay. The next option is the Grand Duchy of Warsaw. Fuck, I'm out of battery. And that thing's not charging, and I think it's lying. I swapped it back in to this camera, and yes, it was lying, but now it's charging with the other battery in it, and I don't care. Okay. If you create the Grand Duchy of Warsaw, which I think Warsaw itself, like this is the territory, they actually put a little thing in it, and it includes a slice of this, and what that territory actually means is really like iffy. Russia is neutral for at least 12 months, so you lose 6 months of grace from the treaty's inception. No one can attack her, and she's not eligible for die rolls. The flag is placed on the production track on the 12. Each month during the English player's alliance phase, move it down. Once it goes below 1, it's eligible for alliance die rolls. Can't accept English production until January 1810. A little bit more recent, a little bit earlier. The Prussian city of Magdeburg, along with any other French supply source in Prussia, becomes French-controlled and a source of supply as per GCG. Okay. The Kingdom of Poland. Russia is neutral for at least 6 months. Now, this adds more territory, but not Russian territory. And I don't know what that actually does for the Poles. Like, Poland doesn't become bigger because of this. Like, there's more territory, but there's nothing of any importance. Even the only city is included in the original Grand Duchy. No one may attack her and is not eligible. Kingdom of Poland. Neutral for 6. Place the Russian flag on the production track at the 6 value. Each month it moves down. They can't accept production until 1809. Magdeburg remains Prussian and does not become a source of supply. So, territory that's valueless, like this is part of Prussia, this is part of Austria, conceivably you've defeated both of them, so you can move through their territory, or they're allied with you, or they're opposed to you. All of which allow you to move through the territory. I see no reason to create the whole kingdom of Poland in this game. Again, maybe I'm missing something. I'm missing, for example, the rules that talk about the creation of Poland. Maybe there's something extended if I create the full Poland. Certainly, if I don't create Poland, I do have a trade-off there. I get 6 more months and English production reduction, whatever. But otherwise, they're the same. All right, invasions. Most instances of invasion happens when one side enters the national territory of another state. However, a French invasion of Spain or Russia is handled in a unique manner. Okay, sure. Invasion of Spain. The total count of pro-French, non-Spanish strength points in Spain cannot be greater than 20 at any time. Of course, that affects this. Pro-French retreat to Spain is not allowed if the count would exceed 20. The pro-French player may not move any pro-French strength points into a Spanish territory in a hex row containing Madrid or territory south of that hex unless the hex is immediately adjacent to Gibraltar, which means you'd have to sail to get there. If the Spanish alliance chart marker is moved to the 0 value and the pro-French player subsequently moved 5 or more strength points into Spain, the move is considered a French invasion of Spain. A violation of any of the preceding restrictions is also considered a French invasion. Okay? Sounds like you just can't do them, but now you can't do them without invading. France may declare war on Spain following the alliance rules. They may? Should the pro-French player do so and subsequently move 20 or more pro-French strength points into Spain, the move is considered to be a French invasion of Spain, and the Spanish alliance chart is not used for the remainder of the game. Okay. If Spain becomes anti-French at any time, the preceding restrictions are immediately lifted. Not sure they can. It remained pro-French and remains a French ally until both Austria and Prussia have been conquered by France. Yeah, they become it by this. Fair enough. Okay. Because remember, Spain's not played by a player. They're the English if they're pro-French. Or anti-French. Okay. If a French invasion of Spain occurs, the following take effect immediately. Spain declares war on France and joins the anti-French. Spain will remain... So even if you don't declare war, they declare war. Spain will remain anti-French through the end of the game unless conquered. And the Spanish alliance chart is not used for the remainder. All right. But this is because Spain isn't a player. Let's go to Russia, who is a player. An invasion of Russia, a French invasion of Russia. If a major Russian city or capital becomes controlled by France prior to January 1810, this is a French invasion. If 25 or more pro-French strength points enter Russia at any time after December 1809, the move is considered to be a French invasion of Russia. Okay. What does that matter? Well, I'm not sure. It may have some impact. Once invaded, they remain anti-French through the end of the game. Among other things, they affect these, perhaps. Invasion of a minor state. When a minor state is either neutral or part of the faction opposed to the active player, and that player moves any army units into the territorial boundaries, the minor state is invaded. If a minor state is part of the faction aligned with the active player, movement into or out of the territorial boundaries of that minor state is not considered an invasion. Yes, you're allowed to walk through your own minors, but they're allied with you and give you troops. And however, if the active player initiates combat against the army units of the minor, the action, I would imagine. I don't think you're allowed to initiate combat without declaring war. They may have gotten rid of some of the declaration of war type ideas, but anyway, it's just a common sense thing. So now we'll hit the optional rules, but I need to break. Part of me is saying, yeah, you're a fucking wuss for not going. But the weather is getting better. Tomorrow's supposed to be yucky, but Thursday is okay. So if, I don't hear anything by then. But of course, today it was supposed to rain all day, and now it's not. We're coming to the feeling that if you own the old War and Peace, this might be worth it for the rolls, like some of the funky shit. If you want that scripted victory conditions, and we'll see how they work. I'm undecided on them until I see them in play. I have my issues with them. So you might want to order the rule book or the Grand Campaign or whatever. If you're new to the game, you sure the hell don't want this version. The old one was a little bit more solid, and I don't feel like it adds much. In terms of components, the old one is easier to play, is more, I'm not going to say visually appealing. This one obviously, this is one of those cases where you look at something, two products side by side, and say, well, this one's obviously the superior product. Just look at the appearance of it. But when it comes down to it, it doesn't work out. Some of the graphic design choices and whatnot aren't. They just make it more difficult, especially with so many of us, growing into that aged era where we can't see quite as well. But this would have been a struggle at all times. There are games that, from the time period, that are just as bad. You get these every now and then, like Whiff with the dark blue English pieces with black print on them that are almost unreadable. And I've seen other people repeat that. All right, the optional rules. Naval economic warfare between England and France. France and French allied squadrons, beginning a new naval phase in a sea zone, remain for the entire phase in the sea zone, and they can commerce raid. To successfully raid a sea area, a total value of naval units is added to the sum of the die roll of 2 dice. French squadrons have a 1 addition. Non-French allied have a 0.5. I assume including Spaniards, etc. You also add the MT, the maritime traffic, which is everywhere, like movement points, but not like IM, which is interception modifier. Okay. Which kind of shows how hard it is to slip. Like, they leave the zeros out, I'm thinking. Okay. That the sea zone indicates. Example, the MT of the North Sea is +2 because there's a lot of English shipping there. From this combined total, now subtract the number of English squadrons in the sea zone and any AAB. I don't know what that stands for. I read it. Anti-business, I don't know. Modifiers which the English player has created by his action against bases. Okay, that's what it is. Cool. They put it in the same place. That's a very helpful way to do things. When you introduce a term, just put it right there. as well as the constant and arbitrary value of 9. So you subtract the English squadrons and the action against bases, and you subtract 9, and that 9 is basically the magic number. Just like, what was it I just played that had a 14? Onward Christian Soldiers. The remaining, which is basically just your target number, but whatever. The remaining positive number represents a change in the insurance rates for English shipping. You repeat this procedure for each and every sea zone in which the French player has stationary friendly naval units, leading to a change in rates. Now, there's going to be a current Lloyd's of London insurance rate, and we need a track for this. It's up here. It starts at 5%, and as it goes up, it starts causing problems. Now, unfortunately, this little track, which only serves to track this thing, doesn't mark the special places where something happens that's different. I'm thinking I may mark up the game. Again, it's just for me, you know. Sure, it drops the value, but I'm not going to sell my games. And someone else may, but whatever. Okay. But there are levels at which stuff changes. Okay. However, before we get to that, if French commerce raiders are operating in the North American zone during a given year, for any war with America die roll during January of the following year, the chance of an American war with England is reduced. Should the war be indicated by a die roll of 1, roll again, and an even result means the war occurs as usual. Odd means the Americans are fed up with both combatants and won't declare war on the English. This is kind of what historically happened, that the French raiding was preventing the U.S. from going going to war with England over their sort of natural issues. How good is that? It's empty. It's a +3. It's as good as the North Atlantic, North American, Caribbean. By the way, the North Atlantic, the North Sea is just a +2. Yeah, it's a pretty good area, but there are other areas along the not in North America that you can pick on the English that are just as good. Okay. And you can keep rolling. If the French end a game year without ever raiding the North American zone, the January war roll is conducted with standard rules, without that 50-50 modifier. Which is important because in the original game, the U.S. and Britain tended to go to war really early. And then it would be over, eventually. But should an American war be raging, the MT modifier for North America is reduced to 0 because English trade is so impacted by the war. A lack of French success at sea or a paucity of effort will encourage the English underwriters to reduce their rates. To represent this, each turn, 3 is subtracted from the total achieved above to create a new current Lloyd's insurance rate. So they're just going to lose 3 spaces. But worse than that, if the French don't make any commerce rating rolls, that amount is doubled to 6. Which means once you start commerce rating, you had better keep going with it. Or else, you lose your advantages of it. But what are the advantages? When the current Lloyd's of London insurance rates reaches 10%, the English have to take action. One of the 3 options is send to the global sea zones either a total of 3 squadrons or 2 English infantry strength points with a transport to carry them there, or expend 3 production points in each subsequent turn. Now, each of these it's something that has to be present. So if you send the 3 squadrons, like if you spend on one turn, you don't have to keep spending. You just have to make sure something is being done. The latter is creating new units and diverting resources to the high seas commerce war. The expended production points may only be used for an action against base attack in the turn that they're spent. Unused points are lost. Where do you track these? I don't know. If the naval units involuntarily sent from the map are destroyed in combat in the off-board display, they must be replaced. You have to do something each turn that you're rated, that the Lloyd's rate is high. Neither land nor naval units may return from the global sea zone so long as the current Lloyd's of London insurance rate remains at 10% higher, unless replaced by one of the other things. It's possible for the English player to alternate his reaction. If the current Lloyd's of London insurance rate reaches 15%, the English player may not draw more than 1 point from each of his production centers. He no longer has to roll the die. If the Lloyd's of London reaches 20%, the English player must expend 3 production points per turn until the insurance rate is less than 20%. If he's already expending 3 per turn, he must also send 3 naval SPs or 2 land SPs to the sea boxes. Basically, you have to do 2 actions. If the insurance rate should reach 30%, you must spend 3 production points per turn, as well as maintain in the sea boxes at least 3 naval SP and 2 land SP. You have to do all 3. If the insurance rate reaches a catastrophic 40%, no production points may be lent to allies, in the unlikely event that the English player has any to spare, and no English land units may leave England except to go into the global war zone. And all English units outside England on the War and Peace map are forbidden to engage in attacks, but they will defend normally. Basically, all your production points, in fact, you're going to have trouble because you only produce 2? I swear there's a third point. London, Plymouth, and Portsmouth. Okay. Plymouth does not have one. Ooh, boy. All right, time to look at the old map. The old map has Plymouth in there as a production city. I think this is an error to leave it off, at least with the commerce rating, because you won't have enough production points to deal with the problem at all. And you need everything out there. All right, I'm going to break to light my pipe and pee and stuff like that because now I'm standing and walking around. Personal stuff. I started clipping counters again for some of those decision games I have. I have a huge pile of them. Because I'm just watching videos and stuff and playing my game so much of the time that I'm like, fuck, I might as well be doing some of this. But it's sort of a surrender, a further surrender. My plan is to eat potatoes tonight. It's kind of funny. I was lucky. I could have gone shopping, at the store that's only 25-minute walk away. But if I hadn't had these, but I was smart enough last time I went shopping to buy a big 5-pound bag of potatoes. I don't know if I was knowing that this was going to happen or whatever, but I don't think so. I think it's more the fact that I had sour cream that I wasn't using, and I'm like, oh, I better use that. Well, if I'm not going to make burritos, the only other thing that I use lots of sour cream on, I used to use it on berries, is potatoes, and I'm like, okay, I'll get them. But it turns out to be really good because it gives me a warm, hefty meal that will help me last through. It's like, yeah, I have other stuff. There's some pork chops that I pulled down. I don't really feel like cooking them, though. This is the thing. I don't like anything that takes much time to make. Usually I'm just like, oh, I'm hungry, I need to eat now. As opposed to, all right, well, let's cook this or whatever. And sometimes, and I can do like boil up some pasta and, fulfill my, I'm hungry, I need to eat now. I can, cook eggs in various different ways. I can toast a sandwich. But cooking a potato takes, close to an hour. And yeah, I'm not going to nuke it in the microwave. That just does not, it doesn't work for me. And something like frying these pork chops, it takes some more effort, but it only takes, like 20 minutes or something to cook at most. It's not a big deal compared to, say, 5 minutes, but not more than that. Say 10 minutes for the pasta or whatever. I don't have to pay that much more attention, but somehow it's just not in my pattern. And it's like, it just doesn't happen. I don't know. I used to make roasts. I used to, fry steak now and then. Make big pots of food that would last me a week. Things like, split pea soup or something. I just don't anymore. Just like everything else, I've let everything go. Okay. Anyway, we were at the 40%, which they can't meet if they only have 2 production centers. So I don't know what to do. I guess I can look in the erratas. There is some errata, but the old game is just better in everything. I don't know. Action against bases. The English player during his combat phase simply indicates the sea zone where he hopes to suppress enemy ports. He cannot choose the North Atlantic because the French are assumed to be using the continental ports. That is that space there, right? Well, this says Atlantic. This says North Sea. This says North Atlantic. The North Atlantic is this, I guess. They're represented as like where I think that's the only one. I think this one is that. MT3, MP1. Oh no, it goes to the North Sea. No, it's a separate one. I thought they overlapped. Okay. So I can't choose the North Atlantic, but so here it's not in the Atlantic Ocean, but it is in the North Atlantic. So I think the rules again are not in alignment with the board. And I think I will follow the board here as opposed to with the production cities where I think they fucked up. Okay. I don't know. My guess is people were playing this game using the old components during the various revisions to it until a certain point, but even that doesn't really make sense. I don't know. Yeah, for this issue to have persisted, I just okay. To any favorable modifiers the English player achieves from port suppression in the North American and Caribbean sea zones are ignored during an American war to represent the upsurge of American privateers operating from North American bases. Any favorable modifiers? Okay, we'll get to that in a moment. In a nonce, that's the word I'm probably looking for. Once the not the meaning that I'm used to hearing it in recently. Well, like nothing's recent anymore. Once the English player has chosen a C-zone to attack for port suppression, he rolls 2 dice and subtracts 10. To this remainder, he adds the number of English naval squadrons and English infantry units in the same C-zone. So if you don't send multiple forces out, you're not going to have much of a chance. He also adds the number of production points spent this turn if he's making port suppression attacks. I think he's only allowed to do one place. So that gets you down to a 7 if you do it just with points. But the reactions seem to indicate that spending points is how you get, you can only do port suppression if you spend points. Was kind of implied up here, and now here it feels like you can do it anyway. Let's keep going. The expended production points may be divided between attacks, but the same production points may not be used more than one attack. If the result is a positive number, the C-zone acquires an action against base modifier of +1. I don't think that there are any markers for this. We could use these fuckers. Use something else from another game. I don't know. It is an optional rule, so I feel a little less grumpy that there aren't necessarily counters for it. As mentioned above, this reduces the effectiveness of French commerce rating in the affected C-zone. If he has sufficient forces, units, and production points, the English player may divide such and attack the same C-zone more than once in a single turn. This allows the English player to acquire more than a single action against base modifier that turn on the same C-zone if they wish. Once acquired, the modifier is cumulative and may never be reduced. There's no limit to the size of this modifier. But if it gets up there, it'll just drive the French to other areas. If the C-zone under attack is the Mediterranean, the Atlantic, the North Sea, or the Baltic, the AAB modifiers do not come into effect unless every enemy port opening to those C-zones on the War and Peace map is captured. By who? Because of the paucity of usable French bases in the Cape of Good Hope, unless Portugal is a French conquest, and thus the French have access to the African colonial bases, each successful AAB for the Cape wins the English player twice the usual AAB modifier. I need to stop. The battery's running low and I'm feeling crappy again. Okay, let's keep working. Naval hidden movement. We've covered this before in the Egyptian campaign. I'm going to go over briefly. Basically, you're able to put units in these fleet markers, and the fleet markers can't be examined. But they also can't exist without fleets in them. So it's not really hidden movement. This is a big deal in the Egyptian campaign one where it talks about dummy ships, but they're not allowed according to the rules that it references. Like in so many cases, you can't tell what the designer really meant. There's no explicit, like this scenario, if you're playing with the hidden movement, play with dummy ships and they work this way. Nothing like that. Napoleon's flight to Paris. During any ground movement phase following a French invasion of Russia, the French player may declare Napoleon's flight to Paris. The following rules will apply. Napoleon has a movement allowance of 20 for 2 turns, including the turn of declaration. He must move in a direction generally towards Paris. He may declare this only once per game. His production die roll will be increased by 3 on the month following his return to Paris instead of the... Oh, this is not in addition to the bonus of 1 that he normally gives. Okay. Weather. All right. The standard game rules for weather are it's winter. And as far as I know, the only effect is on the attrition table. I want to look back because this adds additional effects that were not there. Now I'm going to play with this, but let me just see if I can figure out whether weather affects movement allowance in the normal game, because I didn't have it do so. Can you find any such rule? I don't remember any from the original game. I think it just didn't exist. It affected force march and it affected attrition. Which, you know, the force march impacts movement, attrition impacts units together. All right, here we have southern, central, and northern map. Map board 1 is southern, areas 2 and 3 are central, and 4 is northern. Yeah, it's not split into maps the way it was in the old game. In the old game, it was actually the panels mattered. Here we've got these extra lines which make life more difficult. Between map 2 and 3, between map 3 and 4, a weird little divot for the Alps to make them area 2, I guess, instead of southern France. Okay. Yeah, this is kind of interesting. Now here we have southern weather zone indicated. I think that's just to make it clear because this line is so fucking weird. But here is map 2 under the southern weather zone. There's no southern weather zone, right? Well, there are here. Okay, well, let's see what's going on. Southern, central, and northern. Map board 1 is southern. Areas 2 and 3 are central, but apparently not in Italy, is what I'm guessing. I don't know. This actually looks like it's going between, this says map area 2, but if we follow this line, which is the map area 1-2 line, it cuts across here. I think this is map area 1. I think that's what they're trying to express. I don't know. Yeah. And it's weird because Turin is thrown into that southern. It gets snowy there. I don't know why they did that. Anyway, we'll do the best we can and probably fuck things up. Area 4 is the only northern area. Weather conditions can be fair, wet, poor, or cold. The map board areas are divided into the three. Yeah, we talked about that. At the start of each turn, prior to neutral player's segment, the English player rolls the die. The weather in the central area is found on the weather chart. This is kind of weird. I kind of feel like each should be independent. They're not. You get fair weather pretty much from May until here. Map board area 4 gets a +1 to the die roll. Map area 1, they say Spain, but it's also southern, it's also Italy apparently, gets a -1 to the die roll. And you roll one die and you get the weather for all of Europe, and then you just mark it, you don't roll individually. Weather impacts the entire area it's in. Fair weather has no impact. Wet weather decreases the movement allowance of all units in the area by 1. There's nothing like that in the original. Poor weather increases the attrition die roll by 1 for all units in the area and decreases the movement allowance of all units in the area by 1. Poor weather happens in the spring, the great mud. Okay. And then cold weather increases attrition by 1 for all units in the area. And that's what essentially the winter ends up being. But it doesn't really make sense to have that everywhere. So this is a workable function. Weather does not impact supply at all. It's skipped on turn 1. Weather is fair for the very first turn. Typhus epidemic. A recent study in 2006 showed that 1 in 3 soldiers in Napoleon's army in Russia, about 200,000 men, died of typhus. This is some good research, to pull in something along that line. Just happened to, it's not directly with the military. Yeah, it shows up in your military history feed if you're following it, I guess. For centuries, it's also been clear that the battles of 1813 were waged as much against attrition as against the human enemies of the battlefield. This is going to increase this issue. Starting in July 1810, French attrition phase, or following a French invasion of Russia, whichever comes first, and continuing each French attrition phase thereafter. Roll 2 dice before the normal attrition die roll. A roll of 12 indicates a typhus outbreak, and you mark the typhus box to indicate the outbreak is present. The standard game attrition rolls, the SG, had real trouble with that. Remove section G3.E. Boy, do I hate this. They have these kind of references. I don't know. It's just, withdraw a rule is hard for me. I think that's the real issue. And if it said amend or something like that, I would be better. But and add the following 2 entries. What is G3.E? I don't know. So we have to go look for it. Yay, it is actually the attrition section. This is a +1 if you're on map areas 1 or 4. Now, is this only modified in the typhus case? I don't know. Add the following 2 entries. +1 if the hex is on map board 1. Okay, so you don't remove it for that. +2 if it's on map board 3 or 4. D. I don't know what D means. The outbreak continues until either the end of the game or until France has been conquered, whichever occurs first, because obviously once France surrenders, no matter how much other warfare or whatever is happening and anything else, the typhus would end. Yeah. If France is conquered, remove the marker for the typhus, restore the standard roll. Yeah, so I think this is only if there's typhus. It doesn't affect Spain, but it does affect map area 3, which is the central area, like Austria and Prussia. Wellington's defensive line. This is one of those, I'm going to forget it, but why the hell don't we play with it? Starting in July 1809, if Wellington is present in a hex with at least 5 strength points of infantry, they can begin the Torres-Vedras defensive line. During the movement phase, the active player can entrench this force as long as it remains stationary. Standard rules. Place an entrenchment marker in the hex the units occupy, along with a siege marker set to 3. Each month during the movement stage, the siege marker may be decreased by 1 so long as Wellington and the strength points remain. If the value is reduced to 0, the English player can spend a production point. The entrenchment marker can be removed, and the Torres-Vedras marker may be placed in the hex. This is one of those, such a little piece of chrome, and it doesn't look worth it in most cases. But if you absolutely have to hold a hex, like this one, that you can't get to Lisbon without being in, and you can create a more defensive structure, that's great. It's about the only place you'd want to put it, I think. But, okay. Unlike an entrenchment mark, oh, here we go. Okay, it doesn't tell you what you do there, what it does there. Unlike an entrenchment marker, Torres Vedras is never removed. Once played, the marker remains in the hex for the remainder of the game. Only one marker may be placed per game, and you can put it wherever you like, but there's like one place where it makes sense. I guess maybe on the coast of England, you might be able, like, there's 2 crossing hexes. I don't know. You can get around. See, movement is so easy in almost anywhere that only a little peninsula like that really makes any sense. And I don't know if there is another one on the board. But if I'm looking there, I'll see Torres Valdez, and I'll be like, oh, or whatever it is, Vedras. Any anti-French hex in a force in a hex with the marker has the following modifier. The die roll used for field battles is increased by 1 if the larger force and decreased by 1 if the smaller force. It's the same effect as an entrenchment. The only reason to build this thing is if you think you have to fall back on it as a defense. And remember, it costs you a production point. So it's not a minor thing. It cannot be placed in a hex that contains a major city or a capital city. That's the important thing, because you could defend any city with a ring of forts otherwise. But here, it's got to be on the peninsula. Optional demoralization. During combat, it's possible for a force to become demoralized. Yep. In the standard game, these are all removed at the end of each combat phase. Commonly, however, I don't know how commonly, a defeated force would take some time and would often require considerable effort to rally. This optional rule provides for that using the following rules. Section P9, here we are again. This is where it rallies everybody. It's replaced with the following. At the end of, well, let me make sure. Like, I don't trust them, right? I'm glad they gave me the reference, but somehow, maybe it's the letter number. Yeah, it's just that. Maybe it's the letter number combination or something. If it gave me Rule 13.6.2 is replaced with, I'd be fine. Somehow P9 is replaced. I don't know how deep it is that it's just that simple line. And it's just the unfamiliarity with the formatting that McLaughlin used across the board in War and Peace. Does he use it in everything? I don't think so. It's weird because it's not a normal Avalon Hill mechanism for explaining the rules. Like, I think it's the only game that uses this letter number system. He may have had such a complete game when he handed it in that, you know, when he was shopping it around or whatever, and may have just been unwilling to, like, modify the format. I don't know. And given that Avalon Hill was willing to kind of juggle between formats, unlike SPI, or most companies put out a single format, Avalon Hill put out, like, so many different rules formats. Anyway, where are we? At the end of each combat phase, all demoralization markers remain in place, and each demoralized force retains its demoralized morale value. If the home country of a demoralized force should become neutral or conquered, all the markers are removed. Fine. It's no longer fighting. At the start of the ground movement phase, the active player may attempt to rally each demoralized force if at least one friendly leader of the same major state or controlling state is present. Leaders of the major state controlling the force of a satellite are included. It could be a 0. Roll 2 dice for each hex. Calculate the normal morale for that force, exactly as for combat, but excluding the demoralization marker. Then add the value of the dice roll. Anyone's leadership can be added as well, as long as the leader's in the same hex. If you get a 9 or greater, you improve by 1 level. Army units that make an attempt to rally may still be moved in the ground movement phase. If the demoralization marker equals or exceeds the force's average morale, the effective morale is 0. Or if the force has an effective morale of 0 under any conditions, the force cannot attempt force marching. I think this is a difference. If an equal or larger force of friendly and undemoralized strength points moves into the same hex with the demoralized force and ceases movement, the demoralized marker can be removed so long as the demoralized force has not moved in that ground movement phase. Subsequent to this, neither force can be moved for the remainder of the ground movement phase. So this is like reinforcing in battles. I'm glad this is here. I didn't notice it when I first read it. Should a demoralized force be divided? They all carry the demoralization. Should a demoralized force move and end its ground movement in the same hex as another demoralized force, the lowest demoralization marker must be removed. The entire force is now considered to have a demoralization level of the remaining marker. There's something missing. What if you move to join a non-demoralized force? And I don't know. Feels like this should apply where you'd carry your demoralization to them. Anyway. Nelson's daring. Admiral Nelson famously put himself in a ship at personal risk. Eventually the gambles caught up to him, but not before Trafalgar. But the game starts with Trafalgar, basically. During any round of naval combat, the anti-French player can declare Nelson's daring. Nelson's modifier is increased from 1 to 2 in this round of combat, but he dies on a 10 or higher instead of an 11 or higher. And this rule may be applied once per month. 1 round of naval combat. Okay. With the deployment, there was a little bit of weirdness to it because there's an optional deployment to handle the historical naval setup. I used that. And I guess we're ready to rock. As best as we can, trying to use what I have of this rule book, because OSS failed to get me a good book initially, and has not contacted me after I contacted them. So I think I'm just fucked. This is kind of... so this is much worse than what happened. What happened to me with Ambush was a similar situation where I was like... I've been missing pieces from a game here or there. What happened with Ambush was I got the game and it had dual copies of maps and card sheets. Missing one and dual copy of the other. And so I had I could play maybe close to half the scenarios, but that's it. I ended up getting more, but by the time I realized that, I had lost my receipt and everything. And I'm sure if I had contacted Avalon Hill at that point with the story of I lost my receipt, they would have sent it. I think they were that good. I don't think they were fantastic at customer support, but I think I could have gotten it. Because we're talking a couple months later or whatever. But it looked like everything was there. I looked on the back of the box, just like this one. I looked on the back of the box and I'm supposed to have this. I have it. Great. Goes into my pile. This is one danger when you buy something in shrink. You got no idea. Nobody's ever looked at it. So it could be missing something and they have no way of knowing. Another game that I had a component issue with was Tim Jim's fast food franchise, a game I really like. It was missing one of the placards from it. I emailed them and they said, okay, we'll send it back. We'll send you a copy of it. I think it got lost in the mail. Where I was living at that point, they didn't always deliver my mail. This was not in Arizona, where they also didn't always deliver my mail. This was in Buffalo, and I don't know what was going on. My name wasn't on the thing or something like that, and sometimes they just refused. But again, I lost out on a piece that was important to me. Luckily now having my own house and whatnot. The only problem I have is I don't think they always, when they pick my mail up out of the mailbox, and there are no mailboxes you can go drop mail off in anymore. So it's a 25-minute walk to the nearest postal station, which is inside a store. Doesn't have mailboxes outside or anything like the post office in Phoenix did. The one that did not service my house, it was a few blocks away, and it did not service my house. Instead, it was one that was like a mile and a half away, and this tiny little dinky thing that was horrible, that was actually contracted out. The actual post office was a public-private partnership, and they were just the worst fucking thing I've ever seen. Never trust public-private partnership. It's a horrible thing. It's people trying to take advantage and steal government money, basically. They're trying to undercut the government costs. Well, they're also providing shoddier service. But anyway, yeah, that would have mailboxes outside of it. This one, nah, you got to go inside the store, all the way to the back of the store, and there's a little counter. I mean, it feels like something that belongs in, in the general store of a town like where my brother, I guess, lives now. I was going to say, my mom's, my dad's, they're all dead. Yeah, where all my stuff that is not here is, which kind of sucks, but I'm kind of unwilling to lay the burden of trying to get it up to me. Like, it just feels so guilty, and I'm just hoping I die soon, so it's not worth shipping it all up here. Anyway, let's send this up. I guess I can go with this battery.